Hey, what's up, nerds? It's Paul at Radio Free Hammer Hall. Today we're going to do a re-review of the Nurgle Battle Tome and all of the affiliated things. With me, we have Dan Caravan, who is a man of many Nurgle accolades. 2019 Nova Open third place with Nurgle. 2018, you went 4-2 with Nurgle.
Correct.
And a whole list of local tournaments that you've got first or second in with Nurgle as well.
Yeah. I also got fourth at the Triumph GT in 2019.
Nice. Too many accolades for me to remember, apparently. So Dan is also known for being really creative with his lists and running unorthodox things. So it's gonna be we're gonna have some interesting perspectives here. I generally play the more orthodox Nurgle. Dan is definitely more unorthodox. So we're gonna have lots of fun perspectives to share. Right off the top, though, before we get into it, what is your general feeling on where Nurgle sits right now?
I feel that Nurgle, I mean, this is definitely biased, but I feel like it is at A tier. I feel like there is a lot of things that people forget Nurgle can do because of just how much potential Nurgle has. And I feel that with how the meta is going more towards magic and more towards shooting, Nurgle has a lot of answers to that. Nurgle is fast, Nurgle is resilient, and Nurgle can put a lot of wounds on the table, and that's all things that are really strong right now.
Yeah, for sure. And dips into an incredibly large toolbox as well.
I think Nurgle has more war scrolls that you can use in a Nurgle army without allying than Cities of Sigmar does if you don't count Stormcast or KO.
Yeah. Certainly, I think, yeah, and it's bigger than Stormcast as well, and bigger than Legions of Nagash. I'm pretty sure it's like the largest faction that is just taken without allies or without special abilities in the army bringing stuff in. So
absolutely,
it's an absurd toolbox. So what I thought we would do is basically just kind of go back through the book and think again about what everything is, have discussions about how things have performed and all of that, and get into the other books as well. I've got Slaves to Darkness queued up. I've got Skaven. I've got Beasts of Chaos, Wrath of the Everchosen, and one of your hot ally picks as well. I've got the scroll up and ready to go. So,
yeah,
let's kick this off. Let me share up my screen. All right, application window is the one that I want. And it's not giving me the option to do that. I'm just going to go with your entire screen.
Sure.
And it's not letting me hit share. Maybe if I do it this way. Technical difficulties.
Sure.
There we go. Share.
Great.
Cool. All right. So, figured we'd start at the beginning. The cycle of corruption. This is like the main allegiance ability for Nurgle.
And it is
how much
powerful.
has this factored into your games?
So much. I make prior to the Wrath of the Everchosen book come out, I would always make sure I had enough wizards to make sure I could cast this safely while my opponent was trying to waste unbinds and other things. And I always took the control the wheel command trait because controlling this is so important. But with how the Ever-Chosen book and the new Magic Dominance is going to be, I feel like it's something that you have to rely less on now, but it is so powerful. Like, how many allegiance abilities in the game say your entire army gets +1 to wound?
Yeah, it is very strong. The +2-inch movement, like, huge in an army that's already really mobile.
And there's so many ways to even buff that farther. It's insane.
Yep.
My personal favorite spot is 5. And when you start the game, you roll a d6 to determine where you land. Spots 1, 2, 6, and 5 are all amazing spots to end on. And that means 66% of the time you're getting something great.
Yeah.
And, you know, there are times where you're stuck doing nothing. And with how the wheel works, there's going to be times when you're not getting your rampant disease ability because your opponent took first in the battle round. So it's either really strong or it's doing nothing. And I think that's great design because that's how you balance something that's really strong.
Right. So yeah, rampant disease just rains mortal wounds down on your opponent, and there's multiple other things that Nurgle has access to that can do that don't have any range requirement. Corrupted Regrowth is also really good, just getting to heal D3
on each of your units.
On each of your units. I mean, the only one here that is very meh is Plague of Misery. I also reroll battle shock.
So I also disagree with 3, the Burgeoning.
The Burgeoning's okay. Like it drops a couple mortal wounds around. Yeah,
but it's not as good as it could be for the rest of it. I'd much rather the space does not exist, but it can be decent if you're rolling hot.
Right. And if you're using, the command trait, Grandfather's Blessing, I think it is.
Yeah.
You set the wheel to Nauseous Revulsions, let it roll over to Rampant Disease, do mortal wounds, and then use that command ability to make it move back to Nauseous Revulsions. So you get 2 turns in a row hitting Rampant Disease.
Absolutely. That's how I would win so many games. Just by making sure I hit D3 mortal wounds on units that I couldn't otherwise target.
Right. So really good with stuff like Fire Slayers, where their heroes have no saves against mortal wounds, and they require their heroes to get buffed up, and they hide them behind stuff.
Sometimes stuff that you cannot see because they have a prayer that makes them invisible.
Right.
So it is definitely great. Prior to War Machines having their crew as a separate profile, I used to snipe War Machine crews.
Yep.
And it's something that if you're hiding a wizard in the back, or if you're hiding like a lone hero on an objective, it's something that thing is going to get sniped by this ability.
Yeah.
Especially if you're stacking on it.
Yeah. So our next stop here is summoning.
Yeah. So
summoning is so weird in this book because I feel like it makes a big difference in a lot of games, but it makes nowhere near the difference in Nurgle that it does in other armies that have summoning.
You're absolutely right, but I think there's an interesting interaction with this. Every other version of summoning scales with how many points you're playing. Nurgle's doesn't. So if you're playing a 1,000 point game, you're getting just as much summoning power as you would in a 2K game. And that is something that definitely needs to be considered, because getting an extra 100 points in a 1K game is a lot more than getting an extra 100 points in a 2K game.
Right. What are your typical go-tos for summoning?
It really depends on what I roll on the first turn. If in turn 1 I'm getting 7 points, I'm immediately putting down another tree, because that tree will ideally net back all the points that I'm going to need. If I don't get 7 points, then I'm probably going to hold it and drop it, like either drop a bunch of plague bearers on an objective that I now need to leave, or summon a Nulma after I move and out of range of another one.
Right.
So, though anything else on here, the only thing I've ever summoned otherwise was when I had 21 points saved up and I was out of range, so I summoned a Poxbringer to then use his range to summon Plague Bearers. But
yeah, that is that's definitely a fun trick, that you're not restricted to summoning one thing a turn, so you can just chain summon things and throw something like 24 inches across the board, and if there's room around your opponent to do it.
It's definitely something that we still have, just because we're the oldest book still in the game.
Yeah, for sure.
One thing I will say about setting up the tree is I see a lot of people try and set up in their own territory.
Yeah.
Set it up in the center of the board, always.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Like dead center of the board, basically.
As close as you can. Your opponent, you place it before you pick sides. So by placing it in the center, you minimize the risk of giving it to your opponent. And by placing it in the center, eventually it's going to stop generating you your contagion points. But realistically, you're getting more value of it doing more wounds to your opponent anyway. Mm-hmm. Because your summoning is so weak.
Right. And what I find I use summoning for the most is just summoning like 5 plague bearers at a time and throwing them in the way somewhere.
Yeah.
Like they're just a speed bump.
And that's great. But just being able to control and have that tree from the center of the board gives you a lot better positioning for where you can summon. And that's why I always put it in the center, regardless of what mission you're playing. Always.
Yeah. And it's, I don't know, the tree is, while we're talking about the tree, that's like one of the most powerful other allegiance abilities of the army.
Oh, yeah.
Is it like having that big bubble of run and charge.
It's a massive bubble of run and charge. And people seem to forget that. Really,
yeah. And also you can, because of the timing of the summoning and the way the rules work, you can summon a tree next to a unit that already ran and then they can charge.
Absolutely.
And which is I have caught people out on that so many times. They just they forget I can summon a tree. And there it is. Yeah, I typically use my second tree for utility like that. And it can also just be a thing that you throw down to get in your opponent's way.
Yeah. There's so much mobility that an army that you would normally think on paper isn't quick, but then suddenly you add run and charge and you add the fact that your command ability can give you a 6-inch run. And now you're adding 6 or 7 inches to all of your units' movement profiles. And that's something that people really have to consider.
Yeah. And it really, people read the War Scrolls and don't read the whole book, I think. And just don't expect Nurgle to just be explosively fast the way it is.
Yeah.
Now, if you get units trapped somewhere, you're screwed.
Yeah. I mean, that is definitely true. I've had units of Blight Kings just get situated on the sight lines and I'm never getting them anywhere without like a 12-inch charge.
Right.
But it's normally you're going fast. Like there are builds in the army that you can do that can literally make your units move 18 to 24 inches a turn.
Yeah.
And that's on the low end sometimes.
Yeah, if you go Lord of Afflictions with Puscoil Blight Lords, Great Unclean One, and having the wheel on +2 movement, they can go, oh god, just had it a second ago, 27 inches. And then potentially charge if there's a tree.
Is that with the run or no?
That's with a 6-inch run.
Okay. So that is fast.
Yeah. Not a lot of things in the game can move that fast.
No, I think it's just Seekers of Slanesh, but that's because they get a 2d6 run, and that's about it.
Yep.
It's all about speed, and it is scary how quickly they can go.
Yeah. All right. Command traits. I feel like we don't need to spend that much time on this because there's basically, out of these 3 tables, there's one that's really good. And it's Grandfather's Blessing, and you take it over and over again.
And most of the time, if you're going with something straight out of this Nurgle book, you're probably going to be taking one of the Wrath of the Everchosen allegiances, and that's going to eat away at your command trait anyway.
Yeah. You get a command trait that you're forced into. So, so this table or set of tables has gotten less relevant, but I mean, Grandfather's Blessing is on all 3, and just getting to move the wheel 1 space for free. And it's also worth noting, you can, this is at the start of your hero phase ability. Yeah. So for the other spots on the wheel that trigger at the start of your hero phase, you can go, like, when you're on Rampant Disease, you can do your D3 mortal wounds, trigger Grandfather's Blessing, and then heal your guys.
Yeah. Or there's, or you can heal your guys, then switch it over and do mortal wounds.
Right.
Other way around. It's powerful. And it's a once per battle ability, but hopefully you just have like a wizard sitting in the back out of unbind range, who might be able to cast a spell, because that's your other allegiance ability. All Nurgle wizards get a spell to reset the wheel. Right. The problem is you cast on a 7, so you're only getting it half the time around.
Unless you take a Great Unclean One that's getting +1 to cast. Or there's a demon artifact that gives you +1 to cast as well.
There's also niche situations, like if you're bringing the Vermin Lord Corruptor and you're playing against Skaven, you get +1 to cast if you're near their Nahul, which I think is hilarious.
Yeah, that's true. And you always just have Arcane Terrain as a possibility.
Yeah.
Arcane Terrain is that's probably the single best, or best is a hard one to actually say, the single most powerful one of the
it's definitely one of them. Like, if you're Khorne, you do not care, or if you're any army that doesn't cast spells. But there's so many, like, commanding can be good, but mostly if I'm asking my opponent if we're using the terrain table, it's 100% so I can have Arcane on my side of the table.
Yep.
That's no other reason.
Yeah. All right. So Nurgle artifacts. There are things that are interesting in the artifacts. There's a lot that are really bad.
Yes. There's some that are legitimately useless because of how the mortal wound changes. Yeah. since that rule came out, that hurt Nurgle almost the hardest, I'd want to say. There's a few things in
it even
death
hurt Nurgle that bad, but it hurt us hardest of all.
Yeah, because we have so many ways to output multiple mortal wound saves, as we'll get into.
Right.
But do you want to go one by one, or should I just pick my favorite? Because you know what my favorite is.
I know what your favorite is. Just looking at the ones for Rotbringers first.
Yeah.
The Rust Fang is like always my go-to for Rotbringers.
Rust Fang is really strong. It's automatically reducing someone's save roll by 1 for the rest of the game, especially in a world where there's a lot of high armor armies out there, and especially in the world where you can compile that with potentially Festus's spell to make them -2 armor for the rest of the game is ridiculous.
Yeah, it's very strong. And then Favored Poxes is another potential -1. So like you can like completely get rid of your opponent's saves.
Yeah.
It can be very, very powerful. Other than that, in the Rotbringer artifacts, there's nothing else in here that's like exciting. It's really just the ones.
I mean, like in a world where before the General's Handbook took away the Blessed Sons Battalion, I was taking the Mutter Grub just for an extra wizard per turn.
Right.
But now there's just so many better options that I don't think it's really viable.
Yeah. All right. So next is Demons.
Yep, and that's where my favorite is.
The Witherstave. I know that's your favorite.
Yeah, it is such a good item. There's so many abilities in the game that trigger on a 6 to hit. Like Slanesh gets extra attacks. Some Death can get mortal wounds on it. There's so many. Fire Slayers can also get the Hearthguard Berserkers. Are they on 6s to hit for their mortal wounds?
Yeah, they're the ones that do mortal wounds are on 6s to hit.
Yeah, making that a 3% chance instead of a 17% chance of proccing is invaluable. And that's just, you're still reducing the amount of attacks that land you. And if you put this on something like a Great Unclean One that has that massive base, that's extending the reach of this even farther. And it's because this is the oldest book, we still have a lot of these rules that aren't up to the modern wording. So this is if they're just in 12 inches, not wholly within. And that's a massive amount of range that you're covering with that ability.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, you'll cover a third to half the board.
Yeah. The other pick in here that I will take sometimes is the Tome of 1,000 Boxes. To get that +1 to cast, but only from Lore of Nurgle stuff.
Yeah. I mean, there's plenty of strong Lore of Nurgle spells, so it's definitely worth looking at. And I'd also say the Endless Gift is a great. Yeah. The Endless Gift is a great way to also keep a Great Unclean One alive. I don't know how many other things I'd give it to, just because you will die eventually. And this is just another tool that you have to try and keep it around longer.
Yep. And the thing, though, is like Great Unclean Ones are really hard to kill.
Yeah.
And very frequently I use my Great Unclean One. I use the sword, or not sword, the Bell and Bileblade version. So he has, like, after he moves the wheel a couple of times and gets that initial movement burst, gets a couple of spells off, he becomes less useful later on. So he just kind of battering rams stuff and, holds units in combat and ties up stuff a lot. So even then, he doesn't die that often. He can just absorb such an absurd amount of damage, and Endless Gift just makes him virtually unkillable. You still there? Did we freeze? You muted yourself. Okay.
Sorry. If you see a great and clean one with endless skiff on the table, ignore it. It's not like try your best to ignore it because you're not killing it without putting in way more resources than you need to.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just so often the great unclean one ends up not being worth killing later on in the game.
Yeah, he is the only time you'd ever want to kill him, and this is why the endless gift is a good item, is if you're playing hero-centric missions. Like if you get a great and clean one on places of arcane power with endless gift, that's a problem.
Yeah.
And
so plague-ridden gifts, zero good things in here.
I disagree.
Like just totally not worth it.
There are zero good items in like regulation 2,000 point games. But if you're playing really small point games, the Carrion Dirge mixed with Hideous Visage gives -4, which is one of the command traits, gives a -4 to bravery.
Yep.
And in like 500 point games, that's disgusting.
That's a big bravery.
Yeah. And then again, like in those small games, your opponent's not having a battalion.
So moving on from that.
Yeah.
So Foul Regenesis is a spell that everybody gets that can move the wheel to anywhere you want, going off on a 7. Lore of Malignance. This is our Rotbringer wizards. Blades of Putrefaction every time.
I mean, unless you're taking more than one, but yeah, Blades of Putrefaction every time.
Yeah. If you have to take a second Rotbringer spell, what do you take?
Gifted Contagion, just because that's another way to reduce someone's armor saves.
Yeah.
And so
it's random what it's doing, but it can do something.
Yeah, you roll a dice, it can either reduce a hit roll, reduce a wound roll, or reduce armor. And it's good, but Blades of Putrefaction is just such a, if I resolve this, whatever I touch is getting deleted spell.
Yes.
Because this was never FAQ'd to say unmodified rolls of 6s.
Yep.
There are ways to buff this up to 5 up without even trying. And if you want to take like Gatrax to Spoilers, the Underworld Warband as an ally, you can get it up to 4+.
Yeah.
And that's just
excessive at that point.
Yeah, but like anything you touch is taking a mortal wound in addition on a 4-up, and they're just dead. There's nothing that can survive that much damage.
And one thing that is like where this synergy really shines is so much of Nurgle is like not in quality of attacks, it's in quantity of attacks.
Yeah.
So it like if you take a unit of Blight Kings, like 5 of them are throwing 15 attacks. So you're getting on average at least 2 mortal wounds.
Yeah.
And like that's not even like that's just 140 point unit. That's not going to be the unit you cast this on.
You know, but like God forbid you cast this on Plague Monks.
Yeah, you get this on Plague Monks that charged. So they're throwing 3 attacks each times 40 of them is what? That's 120. So they go off on 6s. So that's 20 mortal wounds.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, but I think they can re-roll hits somehow, but that's even more math. That it's enough. It's enough mortal wounds.
Yeah, it's a pick up your unit amount of mortal wounds.
Yeah. Now, I've played games where I multi-charged 2 or 3 units and I killed all of them before rolling to wound. It's disgusting.
Yeah. And I think the important one to mention here is Chaos Knights with Lord on Karkadrak or Lord on Demonic Mount getting +1 to hit.
Yeah.
So like a unit of 10 knights throwing 51 attacks at +1 to hit, all of their 5+ to hit, do mortal wounds. Like
that's 10 mortals.
That's a freight train.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact, and those Chaos Knights are going to be moving so quickly, it's going to be
10 movement.
Yeah.
All right, more virulence on our Nurgle Demon Wizards. I was a big fan of Favored Poxes for a while.
Same.
Because it's so attractive to have -1 to hit, wound, and save.
Yeah.
But I have recently turned my eyes to Glorious Afflictions.
They're both really strong. It really depends on what you're doing with your Great Unclean One or your Vermin Lord. Because for me, I would rarely cast a spell until I was locked into combat, and then I would start casting Favored Poxes as my second spell with them.
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to be moving with them at that point. Favored Poxes, giving -1 to hit, wound, and saves is probably one of the strongest spells you can put on something in the game.
Yep.
And the thing is that if you're locked in combat and you get the double turn, you can keep that by not casting a spell. That does not go away at the start of the hero phase.
Yeah, there was one tournament that I did that I kept that on a unit for 3 turns. Because I was playing against Flesh Eater Courts, and it was into a unit of horrors against a unit of Blight Kings. It was horrors that were getting regenerated versus Blight Kings with a Harbinger of Decay behind them on mystical terrain.
Yeah, nothing was dying. Nothing.
Nothing's dying. But yeah, Glorious Afflictions, not just half move, but half run and half charge.
And having someone's charge is strong. Also, one thing worth noting, the spell has a 21-inch range, which is very important if you're going first, because people are not going to get in range of you. Your Favored Poxes is a 14-inch range. So that 21 inches, even if your opponent deploys a little bit back, I know some people who deploy half an inch back just so all arcane bolts and stuff are out of range at the start of the game.
Yep.
That 21 inches is enough to get in there and do stuff.
Right.
Yeah. And, if you want to be mean, you could, obviously I would not recommend this for competitive play, but you can put this on a Vermin Lord Corruptor, cast Warp Lightning Vortex, and then cast this.
Yep.
So they're stuck in that.
Yeah. Oh God, that's a thing that I never even thought about. We'll get there when we talk about Skaven.
Yeah.
Shit, I never thought about doing that before.
Yeah.
And then our Lore of Foulness, this suddenly became more important because the Slaves to Darkness book is good and Chaos Sorcerer Lords are good.
Very good.
Yeah.
And they're also cheaper than your regular Sorcerer. So you probably want to take them over that anyway, unless you're taking a named character.
Yep. And just use them to move the wheel.
Yeah. I mean, usually I would just use a Sorcerer Lord to move the wheel. But, Magnificent Buboes is another -1 to hit, casting and unbinding, and deals D3 mortal wounds to that hero that you target with a 21-inch range. That's something. If you could, pick a Lumineth hero or pick something that is if somehow you resolve this on Archaon, him being -1 to cast and unbind and -1 to hit, it's something. Or something like Nagash, like this is all reducing how potent those things are, and it's like a spell that's just an option for you to have in your toolkit.
Yep.
And with Nurgle, you can reduce the amount of mortal wounds you output, or no, reduce the not only the amount of, you can increase the amount of mortal wounds you output, but also reduce your opponent's ability to land a hit by such a degree.
Yeah.
Between spells like Magnificent Buboes, Gifted Contagion, Favored Poxes, between your command abilities, your opponent could be hitting on 6s, and then you throw the Wither Staff on top of that, they won't land a hit at all.
Yeah. Yep. I think Plague Squall is also worth a mention because this is another spray mortal wounds across the board. It's probably just going to be 1d3 most of the time, but it doesn't have range, and it's just visible to the blaster.
Yeah, just anything that doesn't have range is huge because you can't protect your characters. And a lot of what people are saying are strong right now are, Lumineth archers who have 5 inches of being able to pick out an enemy and shower them with mortal wounds. Nurgle has always had that.
Yeah.
And that is definitely something that is a powerful ability to them.
Yep. Okay. Path to Glory, we are not concerned with right now.
I don't even remember if this is the current Warband table, because I don't remember when the Path to Glory book came out.
Oh, the Path to Glory book is really old. This is the current table.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't need this. Warscrolls.
Yeah, Warscrolls. Munificent Wanderers no longer has points as of General's Handbook 2020, so we'll skip right by that.
Let's be fair, you're never able to fit this in a viable list anyway.
Yeah.
You need 2 Talibans and an extra great and clean one, which is ridiculous points-wise.
Yeah. Taliban of Nurgle. I feel like this has a problem with not really having enough hammers.
Yeah. It's one of the things that Nurgle does best is have a lot of tanky units, but you still have to kill your opponent somehow. Like this is generally, if you're going all demons, like, or if you want to start Nurgle and you've played 40k and just have a bunch of chaos demons for some reason, definitely try this out. But this is not something I would ever personally want to build. It's strong because you're gonna have, first off, the rule that says if you have plague bearers plus plague drones in the battalion that equal to 7, you receive an extra contagion point. That's useless. It's not doing anything.
Yeah. 1
contagion point is 1/7 of what you need to get something.
Yeah, that is such not a useful ability.
Like, droning masses says heal 1 wound that's been allocated to your stuff, and for plague bearers, return D3 slain models. Turning D3 slain models to 7 units is, something, but it's not enough, and it's not something that's going to keep you winning. It's not going to be something that's going to keep you in the game.
Right. Thricefold Befoulment. This is one that some people have been having some success with. It's been talked about. It's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, taking the Thricefold Befoulment is where you give endless gifts to the fat boy and the Witherstaff to the support one, and then have Rodigus in the center. And it's a very powerful magic-focused battalion, but magic's going to be so out there. And, I never saw the appeal, honestly. Like it's great to like put 3 great and clean ones down on the table and have fun with that. Like I get that.
Yeah.
But it eats up what, like 1,000 points?
Yeah. The interesting thing though with the points changes, you can run the Thricefold Defoulment and 30 Blight Kings, and then I think have like another 140 points to spare for endless spells.
Okay, so that's something.
Yeah. Like, I think you could put together a legit list with this now.
I don't disagree, but the reason why your list is legit with this is because of the 30 Blight Kings, not because of the 3 Grand and Clean ones. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. Did I just order my 3rd Great Unclean one so I can do this? Maybe.
Hey, I mean, prove me wrong. Like, I would be happy to see that list on the table.
Yeah.
And it's also something that's probably going to be really good against all those small elite armies, just because they're not going to be able to kill those Great and Clean ones as quickly. And chew through, your 120 wounds of Blight Kings or 125 wounds or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Definitely a lot of bodies on the table. And yeah, and it's definitely something. Nurgle's Menagerie.
Like, do we even really have to talk about this?
I feel like
it's like this is a fluffy list.
It's fun. Like, I've seen people play it. I've seen them do like well in casual games with it, because it's one of those things where you just keep on playing. Like, you just have a nice toolbox to draw from. And I actually really like Horticulus. I think he's a really tanky combat hero because he's at a 3-up, 5-up. And it's just something that Nurgle doesn't really have in the book. That's just in this book without borrowing from other things.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like, I can see this being somewhat useful with just spamming plague drones in this.
Yeah, I think the most powerful thing about it, I think, is like the read between the lines that you're totally clogging up the board with Feculent Gnarlmaws.
Yeah. The fact that you're going to be dictating almost how the battlefield plays, and then for using your entire army, where most of your offensive units fly.
Right.
And then, the Feculent Gnarlmaws are going to spit out an average of mortal wound a turn. So they could do some stuff.
Right.
Like, it's definitely like, I own demons, let me have fun with it type of Nurgle list instead of anything. And my favorite battalion that no longer exists,
Blessed Sons. Yeah. R.I.P. Blessed Sons.
Yeah.
Plague Sith, no longer really good because you can't take Blessed Sons.
Yeah.
Blightsist. Yeah. Blightsist, otherwise known as the only battalion you're usually going to see in competitive play, and it's going to be in pretty much every list.
Well, from this book, but yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you're running a list with Blight Kings, you're running Blightsist.
Yeah, we already talked about like 3 or 4 different ways to reduce your opponent's armor save by 1. This is just another ability that your opponent can unbind.
Yeah.
Like, if your
opponent is friend 1, and also ignoring cover is one of those things that we shouldn't forget about either.
Yeah. Like, I have a friend.
The weird thing about ignoring cover is that it's like randomly strong against Deepkin.
Yeah.
Because their +1 save tide phase is worded as all of your stuff gets cover, and the turtle gives you cover.
Yeah. Also, like, Sylvaneth are going to have trees all over the board, so there's units are going to be in cover.
Yeah.
And I have a friend who will not stop using chameleon skinks for the life of them.
Yeah.
So essentially moving them from a 3-up save to a no save is huge.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
And right now with with how cheap things are, you can really take like Lord of Blights, a sorcerer, a Harbinger of Decay, and the rest of your list is Blight Kings, and that's a pretty good list.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, you can be a 1-drop. Like, Nurgle has viable lists that are in 1-drops, and this is definitely one of them. And, like, if you're up against Teclis from the new Luminous Realm Lords, the lowest Teclis can ever get to in that book is a 2-drop.
Right.
So that is something to keep in mind, with especially how quick this army can go. I mean, Teclis is probably going to be screened and probably going to be covered, but if your opponent isn't expecting how quickly these guys can move, if you can just remove them from the table. And being in a 1-drop is something that's worth considering.
Yeah.
On your list. Now, I know you like this one.
I actually don't like the Affliction Cyst.
Oh, okay.
I love Puscoil Blight Lords, but I don't like the Affliction Cyst.
Okay. I mean,
it's got 2 abilities that you really don't need. And you can't take any of your other Rotbringer heroes with it. So, so what are you doing?
Yeah, no, I get that. I guess you don't really need the extra speed because you can just take other units if you really want to go that fast.
Yeah.
But I feel like if the number was 2 to 5 Black Kings or 2 to 6, it'd be better than 3 to 6. Forcing the amount of units that dedicate, I think, is the problem.
Yeah. If it was 2, I could see myself running 2 units of 4 Puscoils and like wreaking havoc with them. But 3 is asking a lot.
Yeah. Hey, Rodigus.
Rodigus, your boy.
I love this so much because obviously you're better at math than me by scores. But for me, he performs better in combat than a regular Great Unclean one. He has a better spell. And he's just cool. Like, he's the same amount of points. You can't give him the artifact, which is the only problem for me, but that spell is so powerful, being able to potentially hit 7 units. I mean, you won't, but potentially being able to hit 7 units and do D3 mortal wound to them regardless of range is big.
Yeah, and it's not even... Oh, it is visible, so they can hide behind stuff.
They can, but, doing Eroticus' spell, plus the wheel being on 6, plus one of the other ignore range spells.
Yep.
That's a dead hero.
Yep, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I think Rodigus is really good. My only reservation is his spell casts on a 6, and he has no native way to get +1 to cast.
7.
Or, 7 rather. So, I want that to cast on a 6.
That's most Nurgle anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, which is why I'm always running this guy.
Yeah.
Oh, wait. Oh, too far. The regular Great Unclean one with the Bell and Bioblade. Really shitty in combat. Like really, really bad in combat.
Yeah, he will never kill anything.
Yeah, he's just a big pillow.
Yeah.
But the spell is pretty solid. Like being able to, heal and do damage at the same time is really good.
There is one thing I will say about this. about Nurgle in general.
Mm-hmm.
The mirror match is the most obnoxious thing that you will ever play.
I still have not done the mirror match.
I have, and it is not pleasant.
Yeah, because nothing does anything to Nurgle.
Yeah. And that's one of the few reasons why I prefer Rodigus over it, because Rodigus' spell affects Nurgle, where Plague Wind could heal your opponent. Like, you cannot use a Plague Wind on an Archaon.
Yeah. This guy's command ability, though, is outrageously good in certain circumstances.
The problem is Nurgle ends up being a very command-hungry army.
Yes.
Because you have no ways of getting extra command points, because this is technically a first edition book. So you got to be like, that's why it doesn't bother me that Rodigus doesn't have that command ability, because it's almost there's so many things in this book that just have really powerful command abilities that's hard to make a decision on what you want.
Yeah. But Grandfather's Joy on either Plague Drones or Puscoil Blight Lords makes them hit hard.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it makes those Puscoils actually offensive, which people don't expect.
Yeah, and regular Plague Drones will be getting 2 attacks because of their aura to give them an additional 1.
Yep.
That's definitely something to take into note. Also, the bell giving a massive bubble of +3 inches to move.
Yeah.
Is huge, especially if you're on a 1. That means you can get +5 inches to move. Your Blight Kings, you're going to move them near the tree, or release one model within 7 inches of the tree. So they're going from 4 inches to 9 inches to 9, 10 for the +1 from the bell on the unit, plus a d6. So 10 plus d6 is how far they're going to run. And that's a 4-inch base movement. That is the weakness on the 4-inch movement is the weakness on that profile. That's how you can justify how cheap they are.
Yeah.
And then the entire army just says, we're fixing that problem for you.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think Blight Kings are not quite as good outside of Nurgle Allegiance because they don't get those movement buffs.
Yeah, they're so amazing value. I think they're one of the cheapest wounds per point units in the game, with 21 wounds for 140 points. So 10 and a half wounds for 70 is cheap as can be, especially when they're hitting on 3s and wounding on 3s.
Poxbringer Herald of Nurgle.
We can skip.
Almost never bring this guy. Like, he gets summoned to chain summon stuff.
Yeah.
Or he gets summoned to jump on an objective and get bonus points.
Yeah. Like, there's yeah. He's I can't even think of any like creative way to use him, because you just have better options in everything else. Because Nurgle has like 56 different warscrolls to choose from, there's almost always going to be units that are just inferior, and the Heralds of Nurgle are usually those inferior ones.
Yep. Epidemus, I've actually seen this in somebody's list before that did fairly well.
Yeah, Epidemus is a model that really depends on what your local meta is going to be like, or what the meta in general is going to be like. Because you can easily kill 21 models in one turn if you're up against goblins, beastmen, skaven, anything with large numbers. But then you imagine bringing this guy and then you find out you're up against gargants.
Yeah. Forget
Like
it.
that, you wasted 200 points right there. Or even Iron Jaws, like it's gonna take a while before you start getting your minimal bonus of reroll wounds of 1.
Yeah.
So
our page of sadness here, Spoilpox Scrivener and Sloppity Bilepiper, two of the coolest models in the range that are both garbage.
Okay, so later we're going to talk about the Slanesh Epitome, and if you want to use the Slanesh, if you want to convert a Slanesh Epitome, use these two guys as on the base instead of the Demonettes, and that's about the biggest use I can think of them.
I like it. Personally, I would throw a bunch of Nurglings around on it.
Sure, I mean obviously that's cooler, but like these like it's been so long since I've read their profiles. I can't. Let's see. Reroll failed charge rolls and hit rolls for Nurglings and Great Unclean. Okay, that's meh. Reroll dice roll making charge. Yeah, it's nothing.
Yeah,
there's nothing here. Anything that they can do for like the 100 points that they're worth is the equivalent of a command point for 50. I like him, as I mentioned earlier. 8 wounds, 3 up, 5 up is kind of tanky for a combat hero, and you can get him up to like 7 attacks a turn, doing multiple damage with decent rend. It's not terrible. And he can also do, spread more mortal wounds. Like, it's something. And he heals himself, which is cool, but he's a little overcosted. And but the main reason why you take him is you want the second tree. I think his best use is if you're playing a Skaven army, though. If you're playing Skaven Clan Pestilence, this is one of your options to ally in.
Yeah. And then you drop down the tree so your Plague Monks can run in charge.
Yeah. But I think that's his best use is if you're playing Skaven with Clan Pestilence, you ally in Horticulus. And that's where he is.
Possibly Slaves to Darkness as well.
Possibly, yeah. Like he's something. If you're like that tree ends up being like almost half your allegiance abilities anyway.
Yeah.
And putting it on a model that you can put in other armies is strong.
Yep. All right. Plague Bearers. These guys just get a points decrease.
And you either take them in 10s or in 30s. There's no in between.
Right.
I think there's only been one time my Plague Bearers have died in one round of close combat. And that was against a Stonehorn, which rolled a 12 for the charge. And did like 8 mortal wounds off of that before attacking them. But these things are so resilient with a 5-up, 5-up, and -1 to hit built in. And if you're near a demon hero, you can reroll save ones, which is something. Like these are the guys that you stick on an objective and say, stay there, and it's probably not moving.
Right. This is like your anvil unit that does nothing but be an anvil.
Yeah. And with their stats, they're never killing anything.
Yeah. But point for point, like if you compare like 30 of these guys is 300 points.
Yeah.
And 10 Blight Kings is 280. Yeah. And most of the time, like those Blight Kings are probably going to be more valuable than the Plague Bearers.
That's true, but it's that -1 to hit which really takes things up. And also objectives count the objective will count bodies, not models. Count bodies, not how many wounds you have. And that -1 to hit, especially combined with the Witherstaff, if you're fighting opponents that are hitting on 4s, now they're hitting on 5s, and half of their hits are getting rerolled.
Yeah.
That makes them like I would probably never take more than one unit unless like 1 unit 30 unless I'm trying to do a demon centric strategy. But I still think they have value, and they're just something to sit on a back objective or move up to the middle and just be, you have to deal with this now. And you're going to tie up your opponent in a round or two of combat.
Right.
And that's going to be enough because your opponent's not going to be able to take them off easy.
Plague drones. These guys just get a point drop as well, but only by 10.
Yeah. It's still good. I mean, it's any point drop I'll take. These guys can get stupidly aggressive with the Grand and Cleveland's command ability and their locus because they have 3 different weapons. So that's adding 6 attacks.
Yeah, 6 attacks per model. So that's an extra 18 attacks.
Just across the command point.
Yeah. Have what, 15 to begin with?
One plague sword, 1 for plague sword, 3 for proboscis, 1 for venomous sting. Yeah, so 5 each, so 15 total. Yeah, you double their attacks from 1 command point.
Yep.
And that venomous sting can be deadly.
Right, and don't forget that you can throw blades of putrefaction on these guys, and they're throw one unit that's 190 points is throwing more than 30 attacks.
Yeah. One of the things to notice about I forgot to mention for the plague drones and plague bearers, that icon bearer, like 17% of the time you're getting models back, and that is something that can just ruin your opponent's game day. There are times that you will win games by your opponent not expecting you to put 1 or 2 models back into your unit, and therefore claiming the objective back from them. Or just, it's something that is so swingy but so powerful that it's something you can't forget.
Yeah. Yeah, so these are definitely very good. I know there was a list for a while. People were running a unit of 6 of these.
Yeah, I mean, 6 of them will, if you get that locus and you give them that +1 attack, that's, what is it? 64 attacks?
That's like almost 70 attacks.
Yeah. And it'll hurt. And when building lists, I like to think I want at least 3 very strong units that could either just hold an objective or deal a lot of damage.
Right.
And plague drones can be a very strong unit for very cheap points with very little investment. And they're one of the 2 units in this book that fly, which is worth mentioning.
Yeah. Flying is very strong.
Yeah.
They don't have the advantage of the Lord of Afflictions doubling their movement, though, that like the Puscoils do.
Yeah, that is the downside. But in exchange, you're getting 1 extra body. I mean, probably the Lord of Afflictions is a better call with the Blight drones.
Yeah.
But once again, there's different strategies depending if you're going demons or if you're going modals.
Yeah. Beasts of Nurgle and Nurglings.
We can skip these.
Yep, we can skip these.
Yeah. There's nothing here. Nurglings can deep strike, but so can Blight Kings with a character.
Yeah.
Now the Maggotkin is interesting.
The Maggotkin, I think, just got a 40-point drop.
Which brings them into ally range, which is very important.
Yeah. So they are super good going into Slaves to Darkness with the 120 Marauder build.
Yeah.
They're good
in Pestilence.
Good allying in Pestilence.
I think you can get your Plague Monks up to 7 attacks each. or something like that, like something stupid with a Glock involved, and then just make them 80 wound blocks.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that said, you can go in the other direction and run Plague Monks and Marauder,
anyway, yeah,
Allegiance, and run a Glockkin.
Of course. One thing I will say is I think he's the only unit in the game with a 2d6 damage shooting attack.
Yeah, it is really powerful.
Like that shooting attack, because, okay, he moves 8 inches and he shoots 12, which means that's a 20-inch threat range.
Yep.
So it's one attack, but you can kill a wizard like 20% of the time. Something like that.
Yeah, you're just straight killing somebody.
Yeah.
Or vaporizing most of a unit.
Yeah, like
it's also Rend 2.
Yeah, which is stupid. Like I do not understand how strong the shooting attack is. Like there are siege weapons in this game that do not output the same amount of damage that this thing does.
Right. That is absolutely true.
Actually, most siege weapons don't output that much damage.
Yeah. Overall, he has a decent melee profile.
Yeah. I mean, so 6 attack. Oh, if you're taking him, you're using that command ability.
Oh, yeah.
So
his command ability to add 1 attack to each weapon is very strong.
Yeah, especially with the Lamprey Maw and the autos Poison Slick Scythe. He's getting 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 attacks.
Yeah, because he affects himself.
Yeah, and that's like my one concern with him is he doesn't have that aftersave. He doesn't have that mortal wound protection.
Right. And you're going to be chewing all your command abilities with Lords of Nurgle.
Yeah, so the way to counter that is taking the Harbinger, and the Harbinger, you're in that command point war, and that's a problem. That's one of the weaknesses in this book. You're just not having extra command points.
Yep. But he does also pass out a -1 to hit.
Yeah.
If your 2d6 is greater than the bravery characteristic of the enemy model, which is not hard to do on a lot of units.
Yeah, there's a lot of units in the game. Like I want to say,
are just -1 to hit all the time.
Yeah, you're not doing anything to the Glockkin, and that's. I mean, mind you, the range is only 7 inches, but it's enough. And
yeah, it's at the start of the combat. So it's whoever you're in combat with.
Yeah, whoever you're in combat with, yeah. He's definitely something worth looking at. But once again, I mean, 18 wounds with a 4-up save isn't that hard to crack. And you gotta try and be defensive about him. If I was to ever take him, I'd take him with Festus to add an extra D3 to healing a turn.
Yep.
But and then you're spending like almost 500 points, over 500 points in named characters. So then you need another character for that command trait and that ability. So it's a lot of investment in trying to make him survivable. But in like a Skaven force or a Slaves to Darkness force, he's just a support piece, and he's a good support piece because those armies were designed without this piece in mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So he's interesting. I think his points drop definitely made him much more interesting.
Absolutely. Like I own him, and I'm not going to lie, I have no idea where I left him because he was like, I brought him out like 3 years ago when the book dropped, and then I'm like, oh, you just die real quick. And I put him away. And now I'm thinking about him like, this could 80 wounds of Plague Monks? That's something to get. That's something. And he's also a wizard that, if you're in Nurgle Allegiance, is able to cast Blades of Putrefaction, which is something, because he gets 2 spells a turn. And they'd be very good spells.
Command ability is a 14-inch within bubble.
Yeah, which is huge.
Yeah.
That is your army.
Command ability.
That is your entire army.
Yeah.
Which is stupidly good. Like, because obviously you're not going to, like, he has like, what, a 6-inch base, so therefore it's extending 34 inches across the table. And because it's within, not wholly within, like, you can just stick one Marauder or one Plague Monk in that 14 inches and then extend that unit farther. It will cover the whole board.
Yeah.
And that, like, it's something when taking that Great and Clean one, you also have to consider, is it just worth it to go for the Maggotkin, because this will just give all Nurgle +1 attack.
Yeah. Yep. And that's even good when taking into consideration, like, Chaos Warriors. Like, they get 50% more punchy when they have the Maggotkin behind them.
Or Chaos Knights, which will get 2 attacks because they have 2 weapons. Thank you, horse. Yeah. Or just anything with multiple profiles.
Yeah. Orgoth's Demon Spew. His reroll failed wound rolls command ability is interesting if there weren't so many better command abilities in this army.
It's the weakness of this army is there's not enough command points to go around. If there was, taking him as a combat hero that has a reroll wound ability with the Harbinger 5-up save, he's 12 wounds with a 3-up, 5-up. And, but he also, his attacks are only 1 damage in combat. Like, that's not that impressive. Like, if you're getting like 13, 14, 15 attacks, like, I could just take a unit of Blight Kings and they get more and do more.
Right. Below Ab Rotspawn, he would be so much better if his Miasma of Pestilence was timed differently.
Okay, so with 14 visible to your next hero phase, roll dice at the end of each phase, which any wounds or mortal wounds were allocated and not negated. I mean,
Demon Flies. At the start of your hero phase, roll a die for each enemy unit within 7 inches on a 4-up, subtract 1 from hit rolls until your next hero phase.
Yeah, if that was in combat instead, it'd be a lot scarier. He's also just expensive for a one spell wizard.
Right.
And it's weird that the wizard is better in combat, in my opinion, than the combat one.
No, he is better in combat. Objectively better in combat.
Like, I'd rather have the 3 attacks dealing 2 damage than 8 attacks dealing 1.
Yep. And then the last one, Morbidex. I mean, he does stuff with Nurglings. We didn't even talk about Nurglings. I mean, he's just
because they're not like, I've summoned Nurglings before, and they don't really do much.
When I summon Nurglings, when I run out of Plague Bearers in my box.
Yeah, like, it's great if I don't own anything else, and that's about it. Like, he's not doing anything really. And then you got the Lord of Afflictions, which is
my boy right here.
Yeah, he is pretty cool. I still don't own one because I'm mad about how I have to essentially buy 2 boxes in order to get one of him, and then I have leftover model.
Yeah, but what you do now is you build an Anvil of Apotheosis character on a fly.
Of course. I mean, what I'm thinking is I'll just buy one and then use that to convert to Harbinger. That's probably more likely where I'm going to go. Yep. Just get like a spare horse and put the rider on that.
Yeah. Yeah, because the riders are great models as well. I've used them for other stuff.
And also, this guy has 4 different weapon profiles, which is great. If you have those abilities that say +1 attack.
Yeah. And the nice thing about this guy too is that he is a demon, mortal, and rotbringer, so he can take any spell. He can take, or not any spell. He can take any
artifact or command ability, and he can be benefited by any.
And his command ability is ridiculous on warscrolls, adding 8 inches to their move. He has to be your general though to be able to do that. Which is like a minor.
You want him as your general. This is the type of guy you want as your general.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. 8 wounds, 4 up, 5 up. Like, he's pretty solid.
Like, you're not. This isn't first edition anymore. You're not getting any bonuses from taking anyone else with a command ability as your general besides him. And he can be. If like you want, depending on what artifact you want, he can viably hold any of them. So he's the target that you want, and he's not a monster, which means if you're shooting at him, he's -1 to be hit. And all those other cute little interactions.
Yep, absolutely. And if Maggotkin's behind him, he's suddenly like a serious beast in combat.
Oh, yeah. I mean, even without him behind it, it's what 4 attacks with D3 damage in the profile, and one like he does enough for essentially a support hero, mobile support hero.
Yeah, he is very good. He's also very good at carrying a Rust Fang
or Witherstaff, but yeah,
either one.
Yeah, take 2, get both.
Festus the Leech Lord.
I love this man so much.
I can't tell you how many times I have read Curse of the Leopard to my opponent, and they've been like, it does what?
It's so strong. And I mean, like, he's only 20 points more than a sorcerer, and the sorcerer's spell is so garbage. And like, this is something that, like, doesn't get noted around a lot, but most wizards have 5 wounds, and he has 6. And considering he can heal potentially 4 wounds a turn because he could Delightful Bruise himself, like that could make him live and survive some magic spells or some shooting attacks or just something. And like, I like to slap him directly behind a Great Unclean One and just double up on the heals that the Great Unclean One gets.
Yep.
And or even in combat, just surprising your opponent, be like, yeah, I do D3 mortal wounds to you with my Delightful Bruise, is something that you're not expecting from a wizard that you don't think can fight in combat.
Yeah, absolutely. Harbinger of Decay, another guy that is a Nurgle demon hero.
Yeah, like Immortal Nurgle Rotbringer hero. Yeah, Immortal demon. Yeah, it's another good option for the Witherstaff because his whole thing is being an aura and being in the like you castle around him almost.
Right.
And then his Witherstaff and his aura is hitting everything it needs to hit.
Right.
And that, like, I was never a real fan of him because that aura was so small. It always bothered me, but realistically, you can get a lot done with it. It's one of those weird things where you just base your model sideways and suddenly it's a lot more effective.
Yep. That is definitely true.
Yeah. Also the Soulbound Shield, just the random 4-up mortal wound negate on himself, which used to be a lot worse when you could stack that with his command ability.
Yeah.
Yeah, he is something that every Nurgle player should own.
Yeah.
It's just, he's strong, and if you're playing mortals, he just adds so much value. And he's another great ally to Slaves to Darkness.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, like, him behind a block of Chaos Warriors is just they're never moving.
Or even Marauders.
Oh yeah, Marauders too.
Yeah, it's suddenly that 5-up save garbage unit.
Up rerollable and
yeah. Suddenly that that 5-up save suicide bomber unit is now tankier than something with a 4-up save.
Right.
And that's scary.
For sure. Sorcerer, I mean, do we take him for anything other than moving the wheel and carrying Blades of Putrefaction?
See, the only reason why you'd ever take him is if you can't fit Festus in your list. Because if you want to move the wheel, just take the Slaves to Darkness 1 because he's 10 points cheaper.
Yep. That's true.
He is one of the things that you just everything he is such a niche role because there's so many things that can fill his slot in the book. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah. Lord of Blights, I mean, he's basically just the Blight Sys tax.
Yes, but if you take him with Plague Bearers or, even a unit of 20 fucking Chaos Warriors, yeah, -1 hit with that command ability.
20 Chaos Warriors seems to keep coming up.
Well, I wonder why. I wonder if that's like one of the better things to take in the book.
Yeah. Or a unit of 40 Marauders doing that to 40 Marauders.
I mean,
turning them all into Plague Bearers.
Nurgle has so many synergies. The problem is that a lot of the good ones are command abilities, and you don't have that resource.
Right. Well, you can take Archeon.
Yeah, that's true. But then that's going to be eating up a lot of your points that you'd want to go into heroes that can give the command abilities. So you're
right.
Yeah. Gut Rot. Or do you still want to talk about Lord of Blights?
No, I got nothing else on Lord of Blights. He's not useful. But Gut Rot Spume, I love this guy.
He is that clutching, can't pronounce that word, is so surprisingly useful.
Oh my god, yeah.
Like the amount of large models or of large enemy heroes that only have like one really good attack and like a few meh ones, and you're just negating all the strong attacks is, imagine negating all the Terra guys' bites.
Yeah.
That Terra guys is like because you're taking it for that weapon, or there's so many strong things that you can just negate. But the main reason why you're taking him is because he's bringing 10, 15, 20 Blight Kings with you behind enemy lines.
Yeah. And I think that's not just powerful because, because it's going to kill stuff.
Yeah.
That is such a huge distraction to your opponent. It makes them divide up in weird ways.
Telling your opponent, I mean, what's the investment that you have to take? Was it like 500 points for Gut Rod and 10 Blight Kings around there?
Yeah.
Around that? Like
it's 520, I think.
Yeah. A quarter of your army popping up behind your opponent, and then your opponent has to dedicate more than a quarter of their army to deal with that is valuable.
Yes.
Because
all of your Blight Kings get +1 to charge, so even though they're 9 inches away,
it's not hard to charge, and even if you don't make it, like the opponent is going to have to dedicate. Because in many missions that you're going to be playing, obviously it depends on who your opponent is, and what army they're running. But there's a lot of missions where there's a lot of different objectives in the back row. Like if you're playing the 2 ones where you can burn stuff in the back, and it's just 4 or 3 objectives in the back row, and suddenly there's 40 wounds of Blight Kings that you have to deal with and a hero. especially that these guys are a battle line, which adds extra bonuses to that. Like you're gonna have to dedicate a lot of energy to protecting stuff, especially when some armies like Ironjaws might send up their more combat-y things to begin with.
Right. Yeah. Like against an army like Ironjaws, you're just clearing out all their heroes.
Yeah. Because this will come down to kill the War Chanter, which might not even get any attacks against Gutrot, which is hilarious.
Yeah. Yep.
And it's definitely a strong unit, a strong choice. And he's 7 wounds with a 3-up save. That's tough.
Yeah, and his offensive profile is pretty solid.
Yeah, 4 attacks, 3s and 2s with 2 damage with 1 red. That'll get stuff done. And you also get a reroll hit rolls of 1 if you target a hero.
Yep. Lord of Plagues. I mean, basically the Plagues is taxed. He's his command ability is awful.
Yeah, there's like this is the worst command ability in the book, probably.
Yeah.
Like I could see it if like you absolutely need to get 1 wound off 1 model, but like why are you taking him to begin with?
Yeah.
Like the Lord of Blights is the same points and just does everything this guy does better. Even more so because he has more offensive power.
Right.
Because you're getting that extra shooting attack.
Oh, the other thing that I forgot to mention on because it comes up here with the Lord of Plagues that you can re-roll hit rolls of 1 for friendly Blight King 7 inches. You can do that with the Lord of Afflictions too.
Yeah. So he's really not anything special. Also, the Lord of Blights, his shooting attack is 1 shot, but it's -3 rend.
Yeah. It's like when it hits like a truck, but it usually misses.
Again, siege weapons aren't -3 rend.
Yeah.
Like I am blanking on things that are -3 rend in this game. And
there's not many.
Yeah. It's 1 stupid dude you're taking his attacks gets a -3 rend shooting attack. That is something.
Mm-hmm. And then the backbone of the army, the Putrid Blight Kings.
When Putrid Blight Kings, they used to be 3 wounds each, and the leader would have 4. And I thought that was because I was playing Nurgle before this book came out, and I love Putrid Blight Kings. And they moved them up to 4 wounds, and I'm like, wow, that's great. And then their points dropped by 20 from 180 to 160. And I'm like, this seems unfair. And now their points drop by 20 more to 140, and it is still very much unfair.
Yeah.
Like
the fact that you can run 45 of these guys in a list and it doesn't feel pushed or skewed is crazy.
No, you're absolutely right. Absolutely. Like, they're so cheap for what they do. For 21 wounds, for 140 points, 3 attacks that hit on 3s and 3s, and like what their blighted weapons do, where when you roll a 6 to hit, a natural 6, you get D6 hits instead of 1.
Yeah, which got FAQ'd from previously being a 6+.
Yeah,
which made it almost strictly better.
Yes, like there are. I don't know the numbers on this. You might, but like there are times when I just either hit with all of my attacks or hit with more attacks than I rolled with, and that is happened more times than I've rolled than I hit with less attacks that I got.
Yeah. So the math comes out to like your successful wounds average should be roughly 2 wounds per model off of 3 attacks.
Which means mathematically every attack hits. Is what you're saying, because it's only They get 3 attacks, and then 2/3 of the attacks are successfully wounded. So imagine,
so mathematically everything hits.
Imagine a unit in the game for 70 points for 10 wounds that says all of our attacks naturally hit.
Yeah.
That's fucking stupid. And that is this unit, and that is your battle line.
Yeah. And they can just like occasionally randomly heal themselves in your hero phase or randomly do mortal wounds to your opponent in the hero phase.
And then you can buff them.
By the way, they're +1 to bravery, so they're bravery 9.
And because they're in small units, that's never going to matter because you're never killing enough because they're 4 wounds on a 4-up save.
Yep. And they're +1 to run and charge.
And because of the tree you're running and charging.
I don't understand.
And then don't forget, there's still all the other bonuses that you can get. Like you can get the +1 to wound from the wheel. So now you're automatically hitting, essentially, and then wounding on 2s.
Yeah.
And then you put them in, and you put them in the battalion. Now they're at -1 rend. These things are so damn good. I do not understand why they went down in points. They were fair at 160, but 140 opens up so many disgusting possibilities.
Right. And it's, I think what they did, my general feeling is they dropped the points on the Blight Kings so they didn't have to try as hard trying to figure out what the correct points values of other things in the book would be.
Yeah, because why would you take anything else in this specific book? Obviously, there's other options in other books, but
yeah. But I mean, like instead of trying to figure out like what's the right points for, I don't know, like a Great Unclean One. Like instead of dropping Great Unclean One more, they just dropped the Blight Kings.
Yeah, like if you're starting a Nurgle army and you want to start it from the Rotbringer book, just buy 4 boxes of Blight Kings and a start collecting set. Yeah, and that's like 1,000 points right there, and you're ready to go.
Yep. Puscoil Blight Lords, the last war scroll in the book. We
got like 5 Nurgle books to go through.
Well, of this book. This book. So I love these guys. They are ridiculously tanky. They can be ridiculously fast.
Yeah.
When they get the Great Unclean One's command ability, they can really punch hard.
And one thing to note, if you're building your army around the Puscoil Blight Lords, you do not need to take the Harbinger of Decay, which frees up your ability to get those command abilities from other units.
Right.
Because they naturally have that 5-up. And that is extremely useful. What is it? You said at the beginning of the show, like 27-inch movement for them before a charge?
Yeah, potentially.
That's
halfway across the board.
There is no world in which you need to move that quickly. Like, in the very worst scenario, you are deploying 24 inches away from your opponent.
Yeah.
And which means they'd have to deploy 6 inches behind the line in order for it to start being in order for you to not end up within 3 inches of them with that.
Yeah. Like if your goal is to alpha strike with Puscoil Blight Lords, you will do it 100% of the time.
And they fly, so they're so fast they can get around screens, which is huge.
Yeah.
Like if you're playing a mission when you're 18 inches apart and you go 27 inches, you can hop over the screen and be at your opponent's butt.
Yeah.
And that's strong. And there is another unit that we should mention while we're on the topic of this book, because they're not in it, Fecula.
Oh, yes. Fecula Flyblown. That is a very interesting one. So doing the math on it, Fecula plus the 2 Blight Kings she comes with, they're almost exactly the same scrolls as the Sorcerer and Blight Kings.
Yes.
And they're pointed almost exactly the same as a Sorcerer and 2 Blight Kings.
Yes. The difference is that Fecula can cast an additional spell once per game.
Yeah.
And that is... So if you're ever taking, a sorcerer, just more reason not to, almost.
Yeah. I still need to pick her up. I have not done that yet.
I haven't either, but that's more because I've fallen out of love with Underworlds than anything else.
And she can also pass off wounds to those 2 Blight Kings, can't she?
Yeah, I gotta read the what's the I don't remember what the it's on the war scroll for the Blight Kings. I don't remember what their names are.
The Wormspat.
The Wormspat, yeah. Yeah, so it's a 4-up additional. Now, I don't remember how the new after save rules work with bodyguard units.
Yeah, they do.
Okay, so even more obnoxious. And actually, doesn't Fecula have... I think Fecula has more wounds than a sorcerer. Because she's at 7 and the sorcerer's at 6. And she has a better armor save. She has a 4-up.
Yeah. So altogether, you're actually getting better than...
Yeah.
Better than
a sorcerer. Yeah. Very strong. It's also just a much better model because that sorcerer model's from 2000?
Something like that. It is ugly.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I've seen it in my 5th edition Warriors of Chaos Warhammer Fantasy book. But yeah. And then back to the Nalma. I mean the Nalma.
Yeah. Which we've already gone over. So it's one of the backbones of the army.
Yeah. By 2.
Battle profiles. Should we just take a quick look at how ridiculous these original pitch battle profiles were?
And these pitch battle profiles were before this was first edition points.
Yeah.
So this was before, different people can use command abilities, and before all the other cool things that you had access to. The Blessed Sons used to be 200 points. It went down to 40 before being removed. I've never seen a reduction like that.
Yeah, that is so ridiculous. Thricefold Befoulment used to be 160. It is now 60.
Yeah,
Blight Cyst started at 220. It's now 140.
Yeah. Yeah. These what's weird is all the units that we skipped over essentially are all the units that they skipped over in chasing the points for. It's almost as if they knew that no matter how much we change the points for this, it's not really going to matter.
Yeah. Yeah. Like Beasts of Nurgle and Nurglings just need new rules.
Yeah. But
they need new rules.
Looking at what these points used to be for the battalions and seeing what they are now, it's absolutely astonishing.
Yep.
And also, if you want to blast from the past, all the ally options include the old words for a lot of factions, like War Herds and Bright Herds instead of just Beast of Chaos.
Yeah.
Okay. That's 1 out of 5 books down.
Yeah. All right. So I'm just going to go real quick over to host our Wrath of the Everchosen to look at the hosts. First, Munificent Wanderers.
These
Our ability is all of your demons worsen Ren characteristics of attacks against them by 1.
which is good. The your demons are already super survivable, and this is compound that even farther.
Yeah. And it's important to note, too, that it's not negate rend 1. It's all rend is 1 less.
Yeah. Which, once again, there's a lot of armies out there which the highest that the rend will have is rend 1.
Right.
And ignoring that is huge, especially because your plague bears on a 5-up, 5-up, which is statistically better than a flat 4-up save.
Yep.
So negating any rent to that is great. If you're going demons, I think this is the one to go with.
Yeah. The command ability gives your makes it so that your opponent takes mortal wounds when they charge you,
which is hilarious.
Yeah. But you have to do it in your hero phase, which is like the worst time to get a unit to do that. It's really more like you're saying, don't charge this unit.
Yeah, but how that's going to work is because the penalty is only D3 mortal wounds, is that unit still going to get charged?
Yeah.
Like if that unit is in such a valuable position, I do not care if I take D3 mortal wounds if I charge it. I'll take 3 wounds if it means winning the game.
Yep. The command trait, I think, is actually super good. The unmodified attack hit roll for an attack made with a melee weapon that targets Munificent Wanderer's demon wholly within 12 inches of the general is a 6. The attacking unit suffers 1 mortal wound. So this is basically plague.
This is how your plague bearers are doing damage, because there's no other way. There are not many units that still exist in the game on a 32 millimeter base that only get 1 attack.
Yeah, they're so bad.
And this is how you're getting that damage out, strictly with that ability.
Yep. And then your artifact of power is +1 to hit for a melee weapon.
Yeah. Who cares?
Yeah. I mean, what we're really doing with this is we have a bubble of bouncing back mortal wounds on hits of 6. Yeah. And all of our guys are reducing rend by 1. So this is being tanky and prickly.
Like, the most obnoxious thing I could think of with that is giving it to a Vermin Lord Corruptor and casting Blades of Putrefaction on him because he has 10 attacks base.
Mm-hmm.
But that's still, and he also, whenever he rolls a I think it's whenever he rolls a 6 to hit, he also do a mortal wound, but like that's the only obnoxious thing I could think of.
Yep.
Is coming in, like, it's +1 to hit isn't what your army is going for, because your army is there to tank and outlast your opponent. And that's what you're doing by playing this list. So making yourself more offensive is irrelevant.
Yeah.
Then again, like, going with that faction and then, putting them in a Taliban and then also having the Witherstaff.
Yep.
Like, the Witherstaff is the most important thing. And essentially by going with that, like, you're giving up your artifact and command trait for the -1 rend for your whole army, which is good. Like, that's worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. So Droning Guard, we have the same locus of corrosion, worsening rend by 1. Command ability, basically +1 to your disgusting resilience on plague drones.
Yeah.
That's not terrible.
No, it's good. It really is good.
I think you're just like you are with so much of the army. You're fighting over command points.
Yeah. And if you're going in a demon-centric army, there's probably other things you want to go with.
Yeah. The command trait, though, all of your plague drones get to move up 4 inches before the game starts. That's pretty good.
Which is cool. My problem. Actually, hold on. Let me check. Do Pascal Blightlords have the plague drone command thing? Do they have that keyword or no?
I think so. Let's see.
They don't. Okay.
No,
so then it's useless.
Yep. Yeah. So it's all
because at the end of the day, you can just take the other version. You can just take the mortal version instead of the demons.
Yep.
And that extra move up to 4 inches up, like 4 inches at the start of the game, is never enough to put you in objective range before your opponent.
Right.
So all you're giving your opponent is an extra, is less off how much they have to roll to charge to Alpha Strike. And this, if you do not have control over who's going first because you're not in a 1-drop, like this move is done, I think, before your opponent decides before your opponent can decide who goes first, and then they can make that decision based on how you move, is my understanding. And that's a problem.
Yeah. And then the artifact is just -1 to hit.
Yeah. Which is great, but there's better artifacts.
Yeah. Blessed Suns. This one's the money.
Yeah.
So when your Rotbringers die on a 2-up, they do a mortal wound back.
Which is so strong.
Yeah. Like, people were originally poo-pooing that. And I'm like, no. You don't realize how much that adds up.
Because I mean, like it might be like 10 mortal wounds over the course of the game, but it's still 10 mortal wounds over the course of the game. And all you're giving up to get this is your command trait and artifact. And if you're in Nurgle and you're playing Rotbringers, you're taking the battalion that gives you Rend -1, which means you have an extra artifact anyway.
Right. The command trait, Foul Conqueror, is absolutely ridiculous. Once per turn, you can use at the double for free.
Yeah, this is the only command trait I think is actually more valuable than the manipulating the wheel.
Yeah. The only catch is that it has to be a Rotbringer unit. So if you're going heavy into other factions, this is not as valuable.
Yeah, there's like 4 to 5 different ways on how to play on list construction for Nurgle. And heavy Rotbringer with a lot of Blight Kings is one of the more viable options. And this is what you're going every single time. If you're in that build. The other ones are like more Skaven-centric, more mixed arms, more Slaves to Darkness, and more demons.
Yep.
And if you're in solid Rotbringers where you're just playing a bunch of Blight Kings, this is something like, once again, the weakness of Blight Kings, because they are so good in absolutely everything they do, is their movement, and this command ability negates that.
Right.
Because they're running, their movement goes from a 4 to an 11.
Yeah.
And they're not losing anything by running because they can run and charge.
Yeah. This command ability is a lot of words that mean basically nothing because it's crappy.
Yeah, once again, you're starved for command abilities, so why bother?
Yeah. For an artifact that you're required to take in a host, Lot-Shell Bileplate's not bad.
It's really good, actually, because you can put that on things like the Lord of Afflictions, who will now have is he a 4-up base or a 3-up base?
4-up.
Okay, so it now has a 4-up, 5-up, which is strong. Yeah. Or you put it
Vermin Lord Warpseer.
Yeah. Or once again, it doesn't have to be given to a Rotbringer. You can put that on a Chaos Lord from the Slaves to Darkness book with a 3-up save. Or one of the ones. I think there's the
Carpenter
one of them has a 3-up save.
Yeah. Like that just makes him ridiculous.
Yeah, especially once again in this build, you're taking something with you're taking Nurgle Mortals, so it will be a 3-up re-rolling followed by the 5-up from the Harbinger.
Yep. All right, and then the last one.
Yeah, the Karkadrak has a 3-up save, so that'll be a 3-up re-rolling.
Yeah. Drowning Guard. Save Nurgle's Embrace ability.
Yeah.
You can reroll rolls within 14 inches of the general for Puscoils. That's not that exciting.
Yeah. This build wants you to go Puscoils, which directly is negative synergy with Nurgle's Embrace because Nurgle's Embrace wants you to have more models on the table.
Right.
That 5 bodies compared to 2 isn't as good. And once again, this is still probably something that's better. I still think the Puscoils are better in the Blessed Suns because, rerolling charges is great, but I'd rather get that extra 6-inch movement automatically.
Right. Yep. So that's it for this.
Yeah. 2 books down.
Slaves to Darkness.
God, there are so many amazing.
The allegiance of slaves to darkness, but I am just gonna really quick hit the Plague Touch Warband.
Yeah.
Because it can be taken as part of Nurgle or Slaves to Darkness.
Yeah.
And it has that same ability that Munificent Wanderers has, but across the whole battalion. All of your opponent's 6s to hit kick back a mortal wound.
Which is insanely powerful. Insanely powerful. Because now there's a little bit of negative synergy here because your wheel spot of 5 makes your opponent reroll 6s to wound. So it makes it, you could be playing at a bit of a disadvantage where you're harming yourself, but you can also just choose not to keep your wheel at that spot.
Right.
And also, not getting wounded versus dueling a mortal wound back, I'd probably go with not getting wounded. But this is a battalion that you can fit your entire army into. 7 Mortal Slaves to Darkness units and 1 hero can get expensive real quick, and you can do a lot of strong, tough defensive units, and you can still make a very strong, reliable 1 or 2 drop army with this. And it's a very powerful ability.
Yep. For sure. All right. Let's just scroll down here.
Yep.
Archeon.
Personally,
I want that model real bad.
Yeah. He's great, but I feel like he's not really benefiting from anything in Nurgle. Yeah. There's so many I feel like if he's in Slanesh or if he's in Khorne, he's getting a lot more value out of it. But that still, at the end of the day, doesn't mean he's not fucking Archeon. He will do whatever you need him to do. But you're still paying that 800 points, which if you own the model and you own a majority of Slaves to Darkness stuff, you might just be better off playing in a different faction.
Yep.
When I started AOS, I wasn't sure how the game was going to go. So I actually started out with Khorne because this was 2015. Khorne was in the starter set, and I bought a bunch of Khorne demons thinking I'll use them for 40K. And then after that, the first purchase I made was the Slaves to Darkness, the older Slaves to Darkness Start Collecting box. And I'd still recommend that Start Collecting box if you have any interest in playing Chaos at all, because that box is usable in 5 armies.
Yeah.
And all of those units in that box are very strong. and they're usable in 5 army. You can buy Slaves to Darkness as a whole Slaves to Darkness army and use them as 5 separate armies at once.
Yep.
And
one thing that I would point out with Archeon is that he does give you double command points.
Yes, and that
it's
is
a very expensive way to get double command points.
Yeah.
And a lot of the stuff that you want to use extra command points on is also on expensive things.
Yeah. Like, if you're playing a massive, like, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 point game, absolutely take him. Because he's only going to make your army better.
Right.
But he's not something I could, like, he's, obviously, if you're playing him in 2,000 points and he's working for you, that's because he's Archeon, he's working for everyone. Yeah. Like, he is an 800-point monster, and he is strong. But once again, he's probably stronger in other books like Khorne or Slaanesh.
Yep. Varangard, I mean, just overcosted in general.
Yeah, like Chaos Knights are better than them. And, like, they're not overcosted. It's just you need to take them with Archeon to get their value out of them. And that's not something Nurgle wants to do. But, like, point for point, Chaos Knights are where it's at compared to Varangard.
Gaunt Summoner, we cannot take because he's Tzeentch.
But, gee, I was a little curious about that because in the Allies, it does say Everchosen. And the disc one is an Everchosen unit. So it's a weird overlap.
Does GHB 2020 still say Everchosen?
I think it does. I mean, it might not, but let me pull it. But even he's an option that just he's breaking in play. Like, even if you could take him, he's breaking in Plague Bearers for you,
right?
Or like, realistically, he's breaking in, like, what Pinkars used to be, but he's not doing what you'd really want him to do. Because the Plague Bearers aren't in a large enough number.
Yep.
Like, but yeah, I mean, he's good. Just I wouldn't use the points in Nurgle.
Yep. Chaos Lord on Manticore. I'm not sure I've even read this War Scroll.
This guy is interesting.
Profile.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I dislike about him is, once again, he's one of the few options that we have to have fly.
Right.
But, like, Nurgle doesn't need combat heroes. Nurgle's the type of army that wants defensive support heroes and wins the game by outlasting and out-attritioning your opponent. And he's something that just doesn't fit into how you, like, Nurgle's game plan. He's still a good unit, or, like, at least decent, but he's not something I would look at and say, this is something I absolutely need for my Nurgle army. I much prefer the Sorcerer version. I haven't read the Sorcerer War Scroll in a while, but I know the old one I used to great success on for hero sniping.
Right. The new one has a completely different spell.
Yeah, I thought so.
The spell now is Horde Killer.
Yeah, Nurgle still says Everchosen.
Interesting. So you can take the Gaunt Summoner.
Yeah. It says Beast of Chaos, excluding Tzeentch, Everchosen, Khorne, Monsters of Chaos, Slaanesh, Slaves to Darkness, except units with Mark of Tzeentch. So the Gaunt Summoner does not have Mark of Tzeentch. He just is Tzeentch. Correct?
Judge!
Fair.
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. I genuinely don't. And he would be interesting in a Nurgle build. He gets free plague bearers.
Yeah.
He's a double caster. I don't know.
But he's not casting the spells you want him to cast because he's an ally.
Yeah. So the Chaos Sorcerer Lord on Manticore, 12 wounds, 4 up, save, 12-inch move. First of all, for a wizard is pretty good.
Yeah, and he's not that expensive, I don't think.
Yeah, and he's throwing 13 attacks.
Yeah, it's not something to slack off.
And he's
260 points.
Visions. So he's making somebody reroll saves for free.
Yeah, which is great. But once again, that option's always on the foot version, who's only 110.
Yeah, who is so undercosted.
Absolutely. And target a monster. You know what? I like his spell. The Winds of Chaos is a very strong spell, but it's also something that you can put that is similar to the Verminlord Corruptor.
Yeah, and mathematically, it does the same thing as the Verminlord Corruptor spell.
Yeah. So, it's close on which one you'd rather have. It's just Verminlord Corruptor has more survivability without extra support, and if you're taking Plague Monks, can buff them, and is, has that keyword demon for instead of mortal.
Yep.
This is my favorite guy.
Mount, one of the MVPs.
Yes. That command ability will make your Chaos Knights, if they have Blades of Putrefaction, just delete things. He's also 170 points.
Yeah.
And I only started using him and realizing how good he was because 2 years ago I was at a convention. I was at PAX East and there was a booth there. And in the corner of the booth they had a metal Archaon, and I was looking for one, and on eBay they were like $75, $100. And I asked how much, and they said, I don't know, $20. Quickest money I've ever handed over in my life. So I got him, and I'm like, well, what am I going to use him for? I guess I'll use my Chaos Lord and Demonic Mount. And then I started playing around with it, and I'm like, oh, this is really strong. This is really useful. Because first off, giving the +1 to hit, and he rerolls charge rolls. That's essentially 2 command abilities in one. Because if you're ever making a very powerful charge that isn't a guarantee, like there's very few guaranteed charges. Like you can always roll a Snake Eyes, and unless you're within 3 inches with a +1 to charge, there's a chance you're going to fail it. So if you're making a very important charge, it helps to have that command point available for to reroll. And the fact that you use that command ability in your hero phase isn't great, but you can use it in your hero phase after seeing if you cast Blades of Putrefaction. And if you do, absolutely use it. Run up, charge, stick into combat, kill stuff. And then if you win the next turn, give it to your opponent so you can keep that Blades of Putrefaction and command ability longer.
Right. Yeah, definitely. And he's also no slouch in combat.
No, 8 wounds on a 4-up save, 4 attacks doing 2 damage. He's not nothing. And he can do 2 mortal wounds. That's new. He didn't used to do that before.
Yeah.
And we got he can heal. Wow, he's better.
Yeah. And then we have the Chaos Lord on Karkadrak, who is
just a more aggressive version.
Exact same guy on a different mount.
But he has a better armor save.
Yes. And one more wound.
Yeah. If you have points to spare, take this version.
Yes, for sure.
Because especially if you have that like best bioplate or whatever that gives you the reroll saves, this guy's so much more valuable, and he will output damage and he will make your knights scary, and Chaos Knights are already scary at 160 points.
Yeah. And he throws 11 attacks with multi-damage.
Yeah. And that's what is he's considered a demon still, right?
No, this one is not a demon.
That one's not a demon. Okay. So that's the one downside. But you can still get strong buffs off of him.
Right. He's like, I originally, like, my first reading of this war scroll, I'm like, oh, he gets either that hex battle axe or the demon battle blade. Like, oh, which one's better? And then I reread the whole thing. I'm like, wait, I get both of those?
Yeah. And then let's also be 100% fair. You're owning this model because if you're building Slaves to Darkness, you bought that Star Collecting box anyway.
Yeah. And the model's really sweet.
Yeah, that too. Let's see. Next is
Chaos Lord on foot.
He's good, but he's on foot, and that's part of the problem.
Yeah.
His command ability is strong, but he's not going to have the mobility to get him where you need him.
Yeah. I mean, being able to pile in and attack twice is really good. But again, like, you're starved for command abilities, or command points. So I'm not sure getting an extra round of combat is necessarily the thing that you want to do. Yeah. And you've got to invest the points in this guy to do that, and he doesn't really do anything else besides that.
Yeah, like if let's say you're buying that extra command point, there's no hyper aggressive unit that exists in Nurgle without spell support, because Nurgle is going to specialize in tankiness and defense, and because this can the only hyper offensive unit that's going to be hyper offensive without Blades of Putrefaction are your Plague Monks, and he can't target them.
Yep.
Marauders and Knights are still going to be strong, but Marauders and Knights are going to be outpacing him.
Right. He's not going to be wholly within 12 inches of Knights or Marauders. So he's a swing and a miss.
Yeah. If you're playing a super castle defensive mission, in competitive, he's a swing and a miss. But there's value to him if you're playing a very narrative game when you're just defending a point.
Right.
But just because he's not meant for competitive play doesn't mean he's useless, but he's just not going to be where he belongs in the top tables.
Right. Chaos Sorcerer Lord, this guy is so good.
And he's doing, and also he's one of the few characters GW sells that will sell $15.
Yeah.
I think I actually have one of these. Yeah, he is so useful. He's 110 points, so he's cheaper than your sorcerer option. He gets one spell a turn, but the Ocular Visions essentially gives you two.
Yes. Yeah,
because it's
the Ocular Vision is how often re-rolling saves. You usually have to spend a command point to do that, or you have to cast a spell that goes off on a 7 to do that.
Yeah. No, you're obviously the math person. Re-rolling saves is generally stronger than just +1 to save.
Correct.
And GW looked at the Mystic Shield in first edition that said give +1 to save and said that's too strong. Let's nerf it. And then just decided to give a better version to a Sorcerer Lord for free.
Yeah.
For 110 points. It is very reasonable that you can build an entire Slaves to Darkness army that has everything in it be 4-up or better, re-rolling saves, followed by a 5-up after save.
Yep.
And that is Ossiarch Bone Reapers pre-nerf level of tanky, if not greater.
Right. And then his spell is really good. And it goes off on a 6. Like, this should not be a spell on a 6. Rerolling all hits and wounds.
Yeah, which is, once again, if you have Blades of Putrefaction, that's amazing. Because, that's more chances for you to hit. Because if you're playing him with a build that allows that, you're allowing some sort of combo to allow you to trigger on 5s to hit, which is, making around half of your attacks being mortal wounds.
Yeah.
Because you're going to reroll everything that's not a mortal wound, which means you're pumping out 25 mortal wounds before you start to roll a wound with a lot of units, which is stupid.
Yeah. Exalted Hero of Chaos. I mean, pour one out for this guy. He used to be a lot of fun with the Sword of Judgment.
Yeah, I loved him with the Sword of I made people go, what the? With him in Sword of Judgment. But without Sword of Judgment, he's nothing. Like 2d6 attacks, 3s and 3s. Like, he's slightly better than a Chaos Spawn.
Yeah.
Slightly worse, almost. And the Chaos Spawns are 50 points.
Yep.
Like, Sword of Judgment, yes, amazing, best character, but no.
Yeah. Ogroid Myrmidon, his command ability buffs cultists, which are non-Nurgle-y things.
So, yeah, like, if you do want to use him in Nurgle, first off, he can't get the Nurgle keyword, so he's going to have to be an ally.
Yep.
And he's only supporting things that can, like, you're paying points for something that can't support your Nurgle, so I don't see why you take him.
Yeah. Yeah, he's just not a take in a Nurgle build.
Yeah, and he's, how many points is he? He's 140 points. Like, you can, instead of the Ogre Myrmidon, you can have 5 more Blight Kings.
Yep.
And that's going to do far more work. This beautiful bastard. This beautiful bastard.
He's so good.
So
he would be an ally in a Nurgle build, but what an ally!
So I picked up a Chaos Dwarf army because I want to. Chaos Dwarves and Beast of Chaos were the 2 armies I was missing before I had just had one of each Chaos army. And the Chaos Dwarf army I picked up, the guy that sold it to me said, "Yeah, just throw in a Bellicor and it's 200 points. Did 2,000 points on the dot." And pretty much he gave me like the bare minimum to make a 2K. Like, I have to take 2 battalions in that list.
Yep.
And it's not great, but with Bellicor as the ally, I was able to win games because of how powerful he is. Like, I am winning games because I'm playing Bellicor, not because I'm playing Chaos Dwarves. And that is saying, like, there are so many matchups you're going to find where your opponent has invested a lot of points into something really scary. That something could be Nagash. That something can be Archaon. That something can be Avalonor. That something can be Teclis. That something, there's so many different, that something could be, 40, 20 Hearthguard Berserkers. If they're not deep striking, Bellicor could look at them and say, you're not going to be useful this turn. And this is another instance in where the double turn is a lot more tactical than people think. Because in Nurgle, especially if you resolve Blades of Putrefaction, especially if you have Bellicor's ability on the table, you do not want to take that next turn most of the time. Because you want those abilities to last longer. You will give your opponent the next turn and then find them doing not what they need to because of Bellicor, because they're still getting violated by Blades of Putrefaction. And that's something that a lot of people, like, that's a level of tactics that if you're just looking at the game for the baseline, you're not realizing, I actually do not want to take this turn right now.
Yeah. And then his spell is also really good and synergizes well with Nurgle.
Yeah. Like another...
it does. An 18-inch range.
Which is enough.
Goes off on a 6. Like, that's really good.
Yeah, no, like... Nurgle is already playing in the space where you can make your opponents be -1 to hit in like 3 or 4 or 5 different ways. And now you're giving them -1 to wound. If you're on spot 5, you're making them reroll 6s. Like, if you're wounding on 4s and now you're at -1 and you're rerolling 6s, you're not wounding most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
definitely powerful. And he's ethereal.
Yeah, I mean, which is potent. 8 wounds on a 4-up save is something, and he gets 6 attacks with -1 rend 2 damage. He can hold his own.
Yeah,
I mean, I've definitely had him die to a wizard before. Thanks, Martin. But but he does what he's supposed to.
Yeah. Regular Demon Prince. I feel like the regular Demon Prince is good if you're running Slaves to Darkness Allegiance and playing Nurgle.
Yeah. This guy was straight up broken before the FAQ, and I'm glad they changed him.
Oh, yeah.
Because Nurgle used to be the best option from him, and now it's just nothing. But also, like, if you absolutely want to run him in a Nurgle army, Nurgle does not have a lot of combat, just very strong in combat on heroes with a demon keyword. And, giving him a 3-up rerolling save and increasing his attacks so he gets 9 attacks, but it was between a sword and talons or between axe and it's something, especially when he's now reducing rend by 1. Like, he's not nothing. He's just not what you probably are looking for.
Yeah. But definitely worth mentioning that in a Slaves to Darkness build with Despoilers, running him as suddenly becomes really good.
Absolutely. He is something that, and also if you're in Slaves to Darkness, you can accidentally get one if your hero dies and you roll a 12, right?
Yeah.
You can just get a free Demon Prince. No, not if your hero dies. It's if your hero kills a hero, and then you can roll 2d6 and you can ascend to a Demon Prince or something.
Yep. Yeah. So definitely interesting.
Yeah.
Dark Oath War Queen.
I think we can skip both of these.
Yeah. They're just buffing Marauders and Cultists.
And honestly, your Marauders don't even need buffs.
Yeah, Marauders are fine.
Yeah.
Does this do anything? Well, can't get a mark on Nurgle, first of all.
Yeah, so this is going to have to be something that has to be an ally, and it's nothing really. I'm sure there are uses for it, but we're talking Nurgle, and you already have 56 war scrolls to choose from before dipping in allies. There's nothing that that thing's going to do for you that can't already. And this thing is one of the best units in the game.
Yeah, this is bananas. And so it's giving out an aura of a 6-up ward save.
Yeah. So this can effectively replace your... if you're playing a Slave to Darkness build, this can essentially replace your Harbinger, just because you might not want to spend your command points. And the after save is half as effective, but the bonuses that you're getting from the prayers are are worth it.
Yep, and all the prayers are on 3-up, which is good odds.
Yeah, that's a lot better than resolving a spell, and. Also, just because you mark him Nurgle doesn't mean you can't use the other abilities, correct?
Correct. And Tzeentch reroll saves is very good.
Yeah, which is, once again, this is one of the options in which you can have an entire army that rerolls armor saves. Between your sorcerers, between your war shrines, between X, Y, and Z, you can have a very tanky army. In the favor of Nurgle, making Marauders 4-up and then the sorcerer spell making them re-roll, suddenly your Marauders are 4-up re-rolling with a 6-up after save, or a 5-up if you still have the Harbinger. makes off that 40 wound block, why is it that tanky? It shouldn't be. They're there to die, and yet they are tankier than Stormcast by a large margin.
Yeah, and then Favor of Chaos, re-rolling all hit and wound rolls is also good.
Yeah, and once again, if you have multiple War Shrines, or like you can take 2 War Shrines and not really be an issue, and you can take 2 Sorcerers and not really be an issue, and so you can have 3 units re-rolling all their hits and wounds.
Yeah, and his area of effect is 18 inches, so he can really he doesn't need to be following really close to stuff. He's got a pretty.
But also, he has an 8-inch move, so he can keep up if he needs to.
Right, and like his melee attacks are also not bad.
Yeah, was it 10 attacks at 2 damage?
Yeah,
I'll take that.
Yep.
Like this, I mean, the downside is he only works on Slaves to Darkness, but Marauders and Chaos Warriors and Chaos Knights are all very strong options for you to take. So it's not a downside.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got one of those in the mail.
Chaos Spawns. So what's one thing I will say about Chaos Spawns is they count towards the amount of mortal units in like your play cuts. So if like you're 1 short, you can just throw in a spawn for 50 points and it will fix everything. Because like let's say you want 1 unit of 40 Marauders instead of 2 units of 20, 50 points of Marauders will fill up that battalion real quick.
Yeah. Chaos Chosen. Let us count the ways that Blight Kings are better than them for the same number of points.
I mean, we'd be here for a while.
Yeah. Let's just say they're bad and move on.
Yeah, like they have the rend, so you don't need to buy the battalion, but no, they have half the wounds. It's not worth it.
How do you feel about the chariots?
So I used to like them. Because like they're cheap and they take a while before you start losing attacks because you have to do 7 wounds before you lose any offensive output. But your offensive output is not something you should really be giving a shit about because it's nothing. So like there are uses for chariots, and I'll get into that once we do Beastmen. Once we get into the Beastmen, but I'm not seeing the reason to get these chariots is 1, if you got the old Star Collecting set and it came with it, or the holiday box and it came with it, or like if you want to convert using the steeds, like that's what I use that kit for. Like back in the day when you could put heroes on these things in Warhammer Fantasy, that was fun, but like this is just a leftover from Warhammer Fantasy that like very few chariots have remained competitive in AOS since the Switch.
It seems like their best use is like in units of 3 as a roadblock.
Yeah, and that's definitely what I use them for because they take up such a large footprint and they're quick, but also you can use that same roadblock with Chaos Knights. Yeah. And Chaos Knights will actually do damage.
Yeah. Speaking of Chaos Knights.
Yeah.
3 wounds each, 4 up save, 5 up save against mortal wounds.
Yeah, this is everything you want in a unit. In my list that I got 3rd place with the Nova GT, I took 10 of them. And then the Slaves to Darkness book came out and they raised their points, but they gave them rent. And I'm like, okay, that's a fair thing. And then the General Shan book came out and they put their points back to 160, which is where they were. So they took my 3rd place GT winning list and just said, that centerpiece of your army, just give them rent now. They're so strong.
Yeah.
It's because you can give them Blades of Putrefaction and they have that +1 to hit with the Chaos Sword. because they're getting, 50 attacks for a unit of 10 of them with a 4-up save, which you can easily make rerollable, which you can easily give them a 5-up after, which you can even make it worse, because with the War Shrine, you can give them a 3-up save instead of a 4-up. And then with the Sorcerer, you can make them reroll that. So now it's a 3-up rerolling. And that's not even a lot of effort put into it. And they move 10, you can run them and then charge, which most of the time, even if, do they still have the, and you add 1 to run and charge. So minimum, they're going 12 inches, which puts you at 6 inches away from your enemy, which is a 5-up charge that you get a reroll at. And that's at worst with a 1-inch run.
Yeah.
And so, they're strong, and they'll take up a large footprint. And with the buffs that you can give them in Slave to Darkness, they won't die easy. They'll stay there for 2-3 turns.
Yeah, they are very, very strong.
This is
I think I may need to buy more of them. I currently have 10. I'm going to finish making what I have first.
Yeah,
try them out on the table a little bit, and then probably buy more.
For 320 points, you're getting 30 wounds of 4-up rerolling that can move, take damage, and output a lot of attacks, a lot of which have rend.
Yeah.
And you also, just for no reason, they give -1 to bravery.
Yeah.
It's just a little extra. Yeah.
Put some sprinkles on that.
Yeah. And
Chaos Warriors. Another one that I love so much.
These things.
There are more guys in. Oh, wait, no, it's 10 or more. I thought it was 15 models in the unit. You can reroll save.
Nope. I think it used to be 15.
Yeah, it might have.
Yeah. These things are so, because once again, these are the things that a 4-up rerolling is better than a 3-up save.
Yes.
And the fact that you can make it a 3-up, once again, because they automatically come with a rerolling, you don't have to spend that ocular vision on them. And for 90 points, it's 10 wounds out of 4. They are essentially the same as Stormcast, except these things get a mortal wound save, which is what Stormcast are weak against.
Yeah. And then compare them to a block of Mortek Guard, and they're pulling the same save shenanigans that Mortek Guard are. And their damage output is almost the same.
If not worse, their save could theoretically be worse than what Mortek Guard used to be.
Yeah,
because and they don't have the rend that Mortek Guard have, or at least, but it's also 90 points for 10 wounds of them versus 140, so they're a lot cheaper than what the Mortek Guard used to be. With when they had Petrifex Elite, they're 50 points cheaper for 10 wounds and have the same defensive capabilities. And you can put them in a 1-drop battalion. You can synergize them, make them move faster, make them wound better, and just do so many shenanigans. These guys are great.
Yeah, I mean, I understand why people like Marauders, and they're definitely in a lot of ways overshadowed by Marauders. But God damn, are these good?
Yeah, I mean, realistically, you take both of them if you're going with Slave to Darkness Guild.
Yeah, I mean, you run 1 anvil and 1 hammer.
Yeah. And they'll do work. And then probably the best unit of the game. At least the contenders for it.
So we can change our lowest charge roll to a 6,
which becomes a 7, because at minimum there's a 3%, 1/36 chance you roll 2 1s, in which case you roll a 7.
Right.
Which you can run in charge.
Run in charge, so that becomes an 8.
Yeah. So at minimum, you are charging 8. The only other unit in the game that can do that is Corgus Cult.
Yeah. +1 to hit when there's 10 models, and rend.
And there's going to be 10 models because you have to buy them in 20s.
Yeah. And then you're usually going to buy them in 40s, so they're going to be 2 attacks each, hitting on 3s, wounding on 4s, rend 1. Blades of Putrefaction, they have the +1 to hit built in, so they're getting the mortal wounds on 5s from Blades of Putrefaction.
And because of how quickly they move, and because they're on 25mm bases, you're going to get a shit ton of them in.
Yes.
Which is why they are so scary. And once again,
you can have a War Shrine follow them and give them +1 to save. You can have
or you can give
them follow them around and give them re-rolling saves and re-rolling
wounds. Which if you have the Blades of Putrefaction, now it's 5s to hit, re-rolling, which means it's going to be more than half their attacks or doing damage. As mortal wounds in addition, and you're probably getting, so that's going to be minimum 20 mortal wounds before you roll the wound. Like it's abusive, and then you can put them in Plague Touch, so when they swing back at you, you can do more mortal wounds back to them.
Yeah, it's just gross.
I do not understand, for the life of me, why these guys are slower when they're on horses.
That is true. They are slower on horses.
Like it is the weirdest interaction. Like you put them on horses and they're suddenly not as effective. Speak of the devil.
Yeah, speak of the devil. Do we really have any use for these guys in Nurgle?
No, because the best thing that they have for them is their mobility. But like, I mean, they're cheap mobile, but like,
yeah, they're filling a role that Nurgle either doesn't need or has better versions of elsewhere.
Yeah, like if you absolutely need to spend 90 points on something that can go that quick, sure, but like your army's that quick already.
Right.
So it's not something Nurgle needs. Like
Soul Grinder.
I think these things are hilarious.
Yeah.
But it's not something that's like you're ever. I mean,
like I don't know how it passed the test of like not being 240K to be in this book to begin with.
Yeah, no. I mean, you can with Magnificent Wanderers, you can make it ignore Rend by 1, so that's something. And it does have shooting, like a decent shooting attack in Nurgle, which does fill a niche, and it is quick. So like there are things for it. I just think it's overcosted, but also like it interacts well with Nurgle wants to do in theory because it can run and shoot, and if you're a Nurgle, you can run and charge. So this thing is quick. Like at minimum, it's moving 13 inches and has a 16 and 20-inch shooting attack. So you'll get out shots, but like if it had the ability for you to fit it into a tally band, then it'd be useful in my opinion.
Yeah.
But
yeah, all his attacks are really swingy too.
Yeah. Like I've seen this work funny and like be cute in Khorne and Slaanesh, but like I for shooting, I'd rather, if I really need something to shoot with Nurgle, then I wouldn't be taking this in the first place.
Yeah,
like there are terrible Plague Claw catapults that I could take, or we can take him, the Slaughter Brute. He is an ally.
Yeah,
I think,
but he's pretty bad.
Yeah, he's meant for Khorne, and Khorne doesn't even take him. So why would Nurgle?
For sure. Mutalith Vortex Beast is Zinch, so we cannot take him.
Yes, because it's marked Zinch, so we cannot take it.
Now we're into all stuff that is not marked.
Yeah.
Furies, not for us. Raptorix, not for us. Like, none of the war bands really make any sense to me.
The closest thing that you can get, I think, is the Iron Warriors. But that's just because they have the Iron Golems. I mean, that's because they have the rerolling saves that they don't move. But it just, if you need cheap bodies instead, if you need numbers instead of Chaos Warriors, that's like something that you can look at. But they're not getting any benefit for being Nurgle.
Yeah,
because you can't mark them. Like, it's something. If you need 40 wounds for like 270 points, I'd go with them. That's about it. The Sphyranx is something that could be like, you can make someone fight last, but also ideally your opponent isn't killing you.
Yeah.
If there's something that if I'm in a game where I know I need something to fight last, I'd rather have the Epitome or I'd rather have the Bellacore.
Right. Yeah.
And obviously those are a lot more expensive, but like I can see it do something, but like it's, if you have 100 points left over and don't know what to take, it's better than Marauder Horseman.
Yes. It has. I think the problem is like it's really good if you have like glass cannony units.
And that's not what Nurgle is in the slightest.
Yeah, Nurgle is not about glass cannons.
Yeah, unless you're taking Plague Monks. But yeah.
Yeah. And then Fulmoroid Crushers. Not.
Yeah,
not
like these are things that like there's so once again you have 56 options, like War Scroll options or something like that. And how many of them are actually going to be more viable than Blight Kings or Marauders or Chaos Warriors or Chaos Knights or Plague Monks? That's what it comes down to.
Yep. So the Endless Spells, the Doom Sigil is nothing interesting, but we can take Darkfire Demon Rift.
Yes.
That
is something.
This is 80 points now, I believe.
I think. Well, it's
just very to certain armies.
Yeah, like if you were ever playing in a Warhammer tournament with a sideboard, take this.
Oh, yeah.
But otherwise, no.
Yeah. And then
it might become viable depending on how the meta shifts.
Yep.
But I can also see, because the meta becoming so magic heavy, a lot more people start playing Khorne that just can shut that down.
Yeah.
Then half the games that you'll play will do nothing.
Yep. And then Realm Scourge Rupture. This one's actually not bad. But I mean, there's plenty of other things that are better.
Yeah.
And it casts on set, always.
Yeah, there's in Nurgle, there's better spells for you to cast innately.
Right.
Like, unless you have. Well, yeah, no, there's just better spells for you to cast. Like, because you still have the Nurgle, the mortal, like, you want to be casting. If you're in Slaves to Darkness, you have the wizard who can cast the reroll hits and wounds. You have that sorcerer. So if you take two of them, you're like, maybe I have the space to cast one of these. But then you remember you have all those cool Nurgle mortal spells that you can throw out. And or you need your spells for your Foul Genesis to reset your wheel. Or if you're in Slaves to Darkness, you have all those Slaves to Darkness spells. And this Beast of Casting is challenging. to me. This one. I tried my absolute hardest to make the Pestilent Throng worth it.
Yeah, me too.
I think
I'm not even going to say go through the units in the book. We can just talk about this one real quick.
so. The only options I could ever think for this being useful is taking 7 Tuskor chariots because they're 60 points each, and just placing them because they're so quick and because you can make a move so fast. Just place them 3 inches from your opponent's line, and then just trap them in the deployment zone. But then you run into armies that can teleport, deep strike, fly, and the strategy goes to hell. Cygors, the terrible thing that can unbind but do mortal wounds to wizards, might be funny depending on how that interaction works with Lumineth, because technically the only wizard is the unit champion. So if you unbind with a Cygor, do you kill the unit champion? But yeah. I don't know how that interaction works, and that's the only thing that's worth it. If you really want to play Nurgle and you only have Beastmen, and you can make them even faster, because the Great Bray Shaman gives out +3 to move, and you take a Great and Clean one to give them +3 to move. Mm-hmm. I think you use this in a Beast of Chaos army that's using all the Beast of Chaos abilities, and then ally in the Great and Clean one for the extra movement. But or for the Glatkin. But this is not something Nurgle needs. These are not units that Nurgle looks at and says, I'm missing this type of unit in my army. Then actually,
a lot of these things also have run in charge on them natively, so they don't need the Feculent Gnarlmaw.
Exactly. This is if you want to bring Nurgle into Beastmen, not Beastmen into Nurgle. Now, I do not remember. Did they move all of Tamarkan's Horde to Legends, or is that still usable?
Christ, I don't even know. I think some of it did.
Yeah.
I think stuff that is no longer in production.
Like Tamarkan?
Yeah, like Tamarkan. His Horde is he is not playable in his Horde anymore, I don't think.
Okay, let's see. Demon Plague Toads of Nurgle are legal. Demon Pox Riders of Nurgle are legal.
Those are all still in production.
But Legends Pitch Battle for Tamarkan is in Legends.
Yep.
Plague Ogres are in Legends. So you can't even take the namesake. Kazakh's in Legends. Where's what's his name? The previously broken character from first edition. Sayal was Faithless. Is he still around?
I don't know.
I actually don't. Because that might be a viable ally.
His war scroll in War Scroll Builder still says Slaves to Darkness.
But okay, let's see if he's in the General's Handbook.
So it gives you a teleport spell, but it has to target a Slaves to Darkness unit.
I mean, it's another tool. I don't see him. I don't see him at all in the General's Handbook.
Huh.
I don't even see him in Legends.
Interesting. All right. And then our last thing to look at is Skaven.
Yeah.
Vermin Lord Corruptor. Can we just talk about
him? I like him because his spell is really strong.
Yes, it is. He's a horde.
And he's a budget Great and Clean one. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah, and he's decent in melee.
Yeah, he's something.
Yeah, he's here. He's an interesting piece If there's a lot of Skaven in the meta, he can rob the arcane terrain off the gnaw holes.
Yeah, which is something you don't see. And I saw Mandolese in the comments said that Sal is Legends, but he's not actually listed in the General's Handbook section under Legends, which is why I was confused.
Yeah.
But yeah, like he's a budget grade and clean one. Like if you need to save 60 points, I think that's the difference.
Yeah.
Between them, like it is something that is a viable cut that you can make, because what you're losing is the healing, and you're losing a few wounds, but he's still a 4-up. The 5-up after, he has a just as deadly spell, if not more deadly, and he's a lot more mobile because he moves 12 inches.
Right.
So he is a viable swap for a great and clean one. You're just changing tank for mobility. The bell, the furnace, right?
Yeah. I just gotta.
Yeah, but right. That the Skaven book is organized by
Organized by clan.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yep.
Plague priest. No reason to ever take him.
Yep. Plague priest and plague furnace.
Can we talk about what a trap plague claw catapult is?
I mean,
it's like
it's one of the only other things that can do 2d6 damage with a shooting attack. The problem is that has to target a unit of 10 or more.
Yeah.
The other problem is it's only one attack. So, like
you want this to shoot at like heroes that are hidden in the back. You don't need to use this to thin out crowds.
Yeah, I mean, like, I want to like this. I think if it was like 20 or 40 points cheaper, it'd be a viable consideration.
Yeah.
But just with when you're only getting one attack with 3s and 3s, you need to take 3 of them to statistically do anything.
Yeah.
And that anything is going to be 3 damage, 3.5 damage. So it's if it had 2 attacks, it'd be better. There's just not a lot to really work with.
Yeah. Plague Furnace. Now, here's a question for you.
Yeah.
Is there any reason to take a Plague Furnace when you can just take more Plague Monks?
No. Because at the end of the day, you're only taking the Plague Furnace to give yourself immune to battle shock, but your rats aren't going to survive that much. So if you really want immune to battle shock, you buy a command point.
Yep.
And you save the money that way.
Yep. Plague Sensor Bearers, hot garbage.
Yeah, I mean, like if you really wanted Plague Monks with Rend, that's cool, but they're missing out on like half their attacks. And that's not the current Plague Monk War Scroll.
Yeah, this is the old Plague Monk War Scroll.
That Plague Monk War Scroll is amazing and needed to be changed.
Yeah. So now we're just, 2 attacks, 4s and 4s, or 2 attacks?
It depends. It depends on what loadout you give them. It's either 3s and 4s with 2 attacks, 1 inch, or 2 inch, 2 4s and 4s with 2 attacks. But
let's go find out.
What happens is when you charge with them, they get +1 attack. So now you're at 3 attacks each.
Yep.
And if you roll a wound roll of 6, it explodes into 2 successful wounds. And it's they get their +1 to run and charge, so it makes them quick. And I think because they're so cheap, I think what might be useful is maybe taking like 3 blocks of 10 now. Like before, I'd always go with blocks of 40, and but they have the Book of Woes, which I always forget about. But it's another mortal wound attack, and for 70 points. 50% of the time, you're just doing a mortal wound to someone. If you really need to get up close and personal, you charge and you get 30 attacks at 3s and 4s. So make your opponent take 10 armor saves. For 70 points, that's a pretty penny. And if you are taking a large block of 40, then you're still outputting a lot of attacks. And if you have the Maggotkin, then that's going to be 80 wounds. And if you have, all the other bonuses that can be put on them, where you can make them reroll their hits, and like they're a very cheap suicide bomb unit. They have their uses. They definitely were a lot better before the nerf, but they can get a lot of damage out there.
Now there's no reason to take a 40 block.
Yeah, I think like small unit of suiciding 10-mans might be a bit better. Like if you run up to like unbuffed, these guys will like maybe take out 5 Lumineth Spearmen.
Yeah.
Which can be enough. Like they definitely have uses, and you can pump them up to make them get 4 or even 5 attacks each.
Yep.
But then you need to take the furnace, and you need to rely on prayers, and you need a Maggotkin. Like they're a lot better if you're playing pure pestilence and allying in Nurgle, because then you take the 40 and they're suddenly hitting on 3s, wounding on 3s, and they're getting their 5 attacks. But they are something that is extremely aggressive and can, like, if you really need something like Marauder Horsemen to save 20 points and take 10 Plague Monks.
Yep.
Because they're gonna do more damage, and they're gonna be slower, but they're still quick.
Yeah.
And your opponent, if they have a bad experience with Skaven, might think that they're, a threat.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And then our last item on the list is the Contorted Epitome for an ally choice.
I love this model. It is 210 points, but it outputs a lot of attacks. And it is so resilient to mortal wounds that, like if for some reason you're playing against Chaos Dwarves, just charge this thing into a Hell Cannon, and the Hell Cannon will never kill it.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of like this is your hero that Lumineth archers won't be able to snipe off.
Yep.
This is your hero that will continue to try and unbind and stop the Salon spells because the Seraphon won't be able to mortal wound this thing off. And having 2 unbinds that you can reroll is useful. Also, just being as an aura that makes you strike last on a 50% chance is strong.
Yeah.
And I think this is just a strong, solid unit that can go into any army that Slaanesh can ally in.
Yeah.
And also its spell makes you reroll ones to hit on like D3 separate targets, which isn't bad.
Yeah.
Like that's icing. Like you take this to be defensive against magic. You take this if someone drops a Warp Lightning Vortex on you, and because you don't have any bonuses to cast, you're unlikely to unbind it. Because Warp Lightning Vortex will hard counter your army. So the Epitome is something to stop that. Even if you're up against like Chaos Dwarves, or not Chaos Dwarves, like Caradon Overlords, and just put that in the bottle. Like it is something stand there and stop it from being stupid.
Yeah, one thing that we did forget to mention is that because the Vermin Lord Corruptor is a Skaven wizard, he can cast Warp Lightning Vortex.
Yeah,
that goes off on an 8, so that's like not likely to happen.
No, it's not. But once again, you can give him the artifact for +1 to cast, and if you're up against once again, not everything is meant for competitive play. Like if you're knowing you're going to go up against Skaven, like take him out, take him to give the +1 to cast off your opponent's knotholes, and take the artifact, give him +1 to cast. Suddenly, it's not so hard. There's a lot of tools. Nurgle has so many different options that there's so many different ways to play it, and there are like a lot of the fun things that you could do have been moved to Legends, like Chaos Mammoths in Nurgle were absolutely abusive.
Oh yeah,
and Nurgle just has a very fun time, and they're strong, and they allow for a lot of cool interactions. They are very synergistic. They have a lot of defense. They can have a lot of offense. They do almost everything well except for shooting. Their magic isn't buffed, but they have really strong magic.
Yeah. So I feel like in general, like they're just positioned really well in the meta right now, I think.
Yeah, the meta wants to come and have relatively low amount of bodies, high magic, very elite forces, and very strong shooting. Nurgle has ways to be penalized to hit and shooting. They have ways to survive mortal wounds. They have ways to target units your opponent are trying to keep safe. And that's why I think Nurgle is an A tier right now.
Yeah, for sure. And there's so many different options, and you can just come at your opponent in a lot of different angles.
Yeah. Once again, if people figure this out and a lot of people start playing Nurgle, then all those Nurgle players are going to have a bad experience in the mirror match. But yeah.
But that said, a lot of Nurgle armies are they can be a little expensive.
Yeah, I mean, like the Slaves to Darkness variant, like prior to this, I sent you a list, and like money wise, I think it costs $450 around retail. And for an AOS army, that's not that pricey. And like your average army might run around $600. Some can get up in the thousands, depending on how crazy you want to go. And $450 for an army that can be played, as Slaves to Darkness, or as Nurgle, or as whatever the hell else you want to mark the Slaves to Darkness guys. That's an army that you'll get use out of, and it's very easy to expand because you have a lot of options. So, especially if you started with a Warcry and you picked up like the Warcry starter set, just combine everyone on a 25 millimeter base and keep on buying more Warcry stuff, so you can play more options with Warcry and use those Warcry warbands as a mixed Marauder unit.
Yeah.
And Nurgle is a very easy army to get in. They have 4 star collecting boxes because of Pestilence.
Yep.
And I like them. I think they're a good option. And I think because of how many options they have, they'll never be a bad army.
Yeah. Even when they were at their lowest point, they weren't bad. They were like a 2 army.
Yeah, they were like an anti-meta army. And at the end of the day, this is the oldest book in AOS. And I still run it meta A tier because of how many anti-meta or how many cool mobility tricks they have, which is why I value them so highly.
Yeah, definitely agree. So I think that is about it. We have hit like every
3 hours.
This army. We could do a whole other show just like going through list building, but 11 o'clock. I'm ready for bed.
That's fair. Anyway, thank you for having me. Have a good night.
Yeah. See you later. Have a good one.
You too.